The hour of 6:01 having arrived, I call to order the special meeting of the Municipal Services, Facilities, and Infrastructure Committee. Meetings being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and channel 1302. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets as you enter the room. The public will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone has had a chance to speak. Anyone who wishes to address the committee will be asked to go to one of the microphones, identify yourself by name and address prior to speaking. Our minute taker is participating remotely this evening, and committee members and myself remember to turn on your microphone when speaking. If the minute taker is unable to hear, they will ask you to speak louder or turn your mic on. So, all this being said, I call to order the special meeting of the Municipal Services, Facilities, and Infrastructure Committee and declare that we are all present, and as such, we have a quorum. Looking at the agenda, in the interest of those who looking at the agenda items 6 and 7, with the committee's approval, I would like to move them up prior to the approval of final design, item 5, on the agenda, just so they don't have to sit through the lengthy discussion that is coming. And on the subject of the final design discussion, I want to make it real clear what we're doing here this evening. We're talking about design features. I will remind the public when we get to this. We're not talking about when the project occurs or if it occurs. We're not talking about anything other than design features. And to that end, if a speaker is rambling on about to do it, not to do it, I'm going to call it out of order because all comments are to be germane to the item under discussion, which is design. So, all that being said, item 1 on the agenda is relating to Keene Roadway Safety Action Plan of 2025, Resolution R 2024-44. And who from staff is speaking? Good evening.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we are going to take item number 1 first?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then in that case, Don Lucia, Public Works Director. With me tonight, Frank and Phil from VHB. Come on up. Don't be scared. Tonight we're kind of culminating about 13 months worth of work on this plan that they're going to be talking to you about here in a minute. But before I turn it over to Frank and Phil, I would like to take a moment to just thank and appreciate the members of the Mayor's Roadway Safety Action Plan Committee. They were J.B. Mack, a representative from Southwest Regional Planning Commission, Councilor Laura Tobin, God, that's embarrassing, from the City Council, of course, Autumn Delacroix from Bike Pack, Debbie Bowie from the Truth, Reconciliation, and Equity Collaborative, City Manager Elizabeth Dragon, thank you, boss, Aaron Rourke from the Keene Public School System, Frank Lindenbringer, representing NHDOT District 4, Fred Roberge, representing the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, Ogle Johnson, representing Keene State College, and finally William Lambert, representing the New Hampshire DOT Highway Safety Administration or Bureau. I think they're a bureau, right? Yeah, Bureau. So those folks did participate. They gave a lot of their time. They attended monthly meetings. Some of them came to some of the public outreach and community meetings that we had. So they gave a lot of valuable insight and assistance to the consultant as they went through this process. I'm really very proud of the product that these guys have produced and pleased with their work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank to show you what he's done.
Thanks, Don. Am I on? Green?
Green is on.
There we go. Thanks, Don. Thank you for having us back. We were here in June, end of June, kind of talk through the process that we used, how we were approaching the action plan. Since then, we have submitted to the city for approval. So with that, I'll get into just kind of brief overview of what we're talking about, introduction about the plan, So it's the safe system approach, the goals and objectives, planning process, data analysis, the community engagement we went through, just kind of reiterate that. And then the new stuff that you hadn't seen before, which is the strategies and actions, the project recommendations that we develop, implementation resources, and that last thing, the care and maintenance, which probably is going to be one of the more important things after the plan's done, after we walk away, how the city can keep going. So with that, we kind of touched on the safe system approach before, and I just want to reiterate it. It's something that Federal Highway has come up with. It recognizes human error. In the past, it was, we're going to eliminate all traffic accidents. I think they came to the realization that that's not really manageable, but let's recognize that humans make errors, and then really design safety measures around that. So, you'll see there's 6 safe systems principles with the safe system approach, and there's also 5 system elements. And really what it is it's repetitiveness. If you do safe roadways, safe speeds, and you combine that combination should help for a safer situation in roadways. And then the other thing that's new is proactive, instead of waiting for accidents, be ahead of the curve. And shared responsibilities. It's not just one group, it's everyone. It's public, it's city officials, it's state officials. So just kind of really emphasize where that's coming from. And then the plan itself, the goal and objectives that the committee that Dawn had mentioned, it looked at what the DOT had developed for the strategic highway safety plan and kind of actually moved it up a little. We talked about number of fatalities and serious injuries, and the goal is in 2035 to have 50% reduction. And then actually in 10 years later, work towards 0. So that's an ambitious goal, but with the action plans that's out there and the strategic projects, we can see how this is going to work. The objectives, preventing crashes for fatalities and serious injuries. That's really where we want to head. You're going to promote the safe system approach, like I said. But the other thing is engage partners and the public. So it's a combined, like we talked about, a shared responsibility. And then the planning process that we went through. We talked about the committees that we had. We engaged the local leadership with Keene and outside. And then the other thing we looked at was really the statewide safety initiatives. So New Hampshire DOT has developed a strategic highway safety plan, so every 5 years. And one of the things we wanted to make sure of is it works together with the state's objectives. So what's on the screen is, in the right side, is critical emphasis areas. Our plan aligns with that. So emphasis areas are intersections, older drivers, speeding. So we wanted to make sure that we align the plan accordingly so that it could work together. And then adopt the safe system approach that we talked about. And then really the committees, Don mentioned the roadway safety plan committee, but we also had the technical advisory committee that we met with. Those 2 different organizations really helped form the plan beyond just meeting with the public. So it was a real good process, a lot of good input there that really kind of set up for where we were headed. The data analysis, so we get our data from the New Hampshire motor vehicles. So we looked at 10 years of data. We recognized there was about 4,500 crashes in Keene, but only about, I wouldn't say only, 12% resulted in fatal, serious, and minor injuries. It looks small, but actually it's a big number. You really want 0. But one of the big things that came out of our analysis was 68% occurred at intersections. And why that's important is your vulnerable users, your walkers, your bicyclists, your conflicts with cars are at intersections. So by cutting those down or looking at improving, and that could be as simple as lighting, as much as education. Doesn't have to be physical projects, but, so we did a data analysis there. On the right-hand side, just not to get too much in the weeds, but we looked at a high injury network, which is basically roadway segments, and there's 15, we did the top 15 that had a higher rate of serious injuries or fatalities from the city. So it just kind of gave us areas to look at in a little bit more detail. And then Phil joined me here. Community engagement, really, Phil spearheaded that. We did the project website, which got the information out. The online survey, we had over 500 respondents. I think we had over 1,500 comments and pins of improvements. So a lot of information came in, which was great because we talked about the data analysis and we wanted to be proactive. We were looking at crashes, the online survey, the public meetings that we had, and then all the other stakeholder meetings gave us other ways to look at if something isn't coming up with the data analysis. Why is that? Is there a street that is dangerous or feels to be dangerous or unsafe, but no one travels it, so you don't have accidents? So that's kind of where that comes in. And it's kind of a holistic approach there. And then really taking the public, taking the crash analysis, and really coming in and developing strategies and actions. So of the program, of the plan that we had, there was 5 strategies that kept coming up and repetitive was improve safety for non-motorized road users, your bicyclists, your pedestrians, enhancing lighting and signing, reduce conflicts and intersections, and kind of worked with what we found with the data. You know, there was a lot of accidents, 68% of crashes were at intersections. Speed management, as you can imagine, was one. And then the other thing with plans, policies, and the program, education, and multi-jurisdictional coordination. So what that does is we looked at the complete streets that Keene had developed, the plan there. We looked at programs that Keene had established. And really, where could it be aligned with the safe system approach and with this plan? So we had offered some suggestions and try to utilize that. So we wanted to add that to the plan, especially education. Sometimes that gets missed. I think Keene does a great job with social media, and I think if adding that to it, you know, you have a lot of roundabouts, you have a lot of improvements going on, so that keep going. And then taking that information and developing project recommendations. Phil helped develop this evaluation criteria. We had over 190 projects recommended, or project that were developed from all the input that we got. So which is quite a big list to go through, but it really developed a diverse group of bicycle roadway improvements. It wasn't for one location or for one aspect. It really included everything. And then with the evaluation criteria, we wanted to make sure we had a comprehensive list with crash data, equity, community support, et cetera. So in the report itself, you'll find that there's a big spreadsheet or database, maybe a little bit bigger than you expected, but just kind of outlining everything that we saw to give the city a way to work on and make improvements where necessary or where they feel necessary. And then that's great with the projects, but really it comes down to funding. So the implementation resources, we outlined where we know that either the federal government with the Safe Streets for All, which was where this started, there's a second part, which is implementation, demonstration. But also New Hampshire DOT has their congestion mitigation, air quality, their CMAQ program, their transportation alternatives program, so the TAP. There's others here as well, but we also know that over time, there's other funding, grants seem to be popping up, so there's other ways to go through your resources and pull that. And then really the care and maintenance. We've developed a plan, and it's really great. That's a snapshot in time, but it's really a living document. It's made so that the city can continue to build on it. If projects are completed, how are they being completed? What's the benefit? Are they succeeding? There's other things there. So data collection, evaluation, how to incorporate that to keep the plan going. But also the public reporting and public education. You want to be upfront, you're transparent, the city's always been, and how to get that out to the public that things are working, you know. And then the integration of the plan and how that works together. But I think that, the biggest part, and we have it in the report, but I think it speaks well, is it's a living document that will continually be updated and refined as new data, projects, and technologies become available. And I think that's key. We know year after year technologies keep improving, But this iterative process not only keeps the plan responsive in emerging trends and innovations, but also ensures that new insights and community feedback are continuously integrated. So you're going to have new residents, plans, projects are coming through, some other area that might have to be addressed or looked at. So it kind of keeps that going. And then the plan remains dynamic. You know, it's adapting to the evolving safety challenges and opportunities to better achieve the goal of 0 roadway fatalities and serious injuries by 2045. So that's where we're coming from, and that's where we're headed. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dawn. And
Thank you, Frank. So I'd just like to speak real quick about how Public Works will use this document going forward. Really looking at this as more like a reference document. Honestly, you know, Frank mentioned the 190 or so recommendations. Realistically, we'll still be working on some of these recommendations when I retire, right? This is going to take a long time, but it's going to be a document that we can reference when we're doing projects in-house. We can look to see, are there any of these improvements that we can make while we're doing an infrastructure project, for example? If there's CIP projects coming up, how that get included? Frank mentioned grant opportunities. You know, there's some of these improvements would be natural fits for different grants, like the MAST or the Safe Streets for All implementation. So we'll look for those opportunities. I would like to plan on coming back and reporting about this, probably about like once a year. Give you an update on what projects we've managed to check off the list, if we're seeing any impact in terms of crash trends and whatnot. And lastly, I do want to highlight that those 190 recommendations, the vast majority of those actually came from the public, which I think is super cool. We did a lot of outreach. We had online surveys, and the VHB team took all of that feedback and combined similar recommendations where they were, overlapped. There was a lot of people recommending the same things, but the vast majority of those recommendations came from residents of Keene, which I think is great. And with that, we'd love to take your questions.
Thank you. Committee question? Jake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and then a question. First of all, I did read through the whole draft plan. It was a lot of information to take in 48 hours, but one of the things that stuck out to me was that I totaled up 42% of the either fatal, serious, or minor injury crashes being directly related to driver behavior. So whether that was impaired driving, speeding, or distracted driving. It's a conversation that we have had a lot at this committee lately, but there's a real significant education component to this and an awareness component. And that's the job of city staff, but I think it's the job of all of us in the community to, hold each other accountable for our behaviors in the car. It was a sobering number to see that, we can, I think it was the Public Works Director that said earlier this summer that there's no engineering solution to human behavior, right? And so these projects will help one kind of traffic problem, but the driver behavior issue remains, and so I was happy to see the emphasis on education here. My question is, and I have a specific question, but it is kind of more general as well. I'll just ask it, and then you'll see what I mean. So one of the recommendations was limiting the right turn on red opportunities in Keene. And I looked through the plan, and I didn't necessarily see any granular data about if how many crashes we could tie to a right turn on red. And I wonder if granular data either for that, which is the specific part, or more generally is available, not in, I don't want a million appendices to this plan, but somewhere else.
Why don't you take that one?
Yeah. When crashes are recorded, they, either the state or the city, police officers fill out the crash reports. Not all that information. It's not as robust as we would hope. That's one thing that has been noted while we went through this process of how crash data can be reported a little bit more accurately or a little bit more content for such. One of the things that we don't have access to is the type of crash, whether it's a rear end or a side swipe. That's in the crash report, but we don't get that. We get the database. We'd have to request all the crash reports and have it redacted. So unfortunately, I wish we could have that data. It would show a lot. Other states do collect it, but unfortunately, we couldn't.
And what Frank is getting at points to kind of some, I guess, it's a legislative concern here in the state. Yeah, I understand the privacy concerns for sure, but at the same time, the Department of Safety has this database of information that would really help practitioners in the field save lives, but state law doesn't allow them to share it with us, and that is problematic. I think everybody in DOT understands the issue, but it's going to take a legislative solution to fix.
Yep. Counselor.
So I was part of this committee, and I was really excited when I was asked to be on this committee because I think a lot about safety on the roadway as a pedestrian, primarily. And I was initially thinking that I was going to be able to contribute a lot, but honestly, I feel like I learned so much through this process, and it stimulated so many conversations, even in asking people to take the survey, that led to all of these conversations at my workplace about problems that they had with the roadways that I was able to then bring back to the committee. And I feel like any question that you were to ask about one line in this document, the people on this committee, just props to them because they struggled with it, so it was a debate. Well, what should the goal be? Should we focus on this or should we focus on this? Doesn't this matter? What about this? And so there really was this constant striving to find opportunities for improvement. And I think that, just to kind of echo the point about it being a living document, I think that's really valuable because guidelines are going to change. I know recently, correct me if I'm wrong, but where flashing beacons go, there was a change in guidelines surrounding that. But one of the other things that was really exciting to see was also that a lot of the projects that came up as priorities were already in the works. They were already being planned. And so that was really exciting to see. So I'm excited about this.
Good. Yep. Any questions, comments from the public? Tremendous report. Really, really very well done, very thorough. So thank you to the consultants and to the committee. Obviously, it took a lot of time. So, Councilor Jacob.
I move to recommend that the City Council adopt Resolution R 2024-44 relating to the Keene Roadway Safety Action Plan of 2025.
Second.
Seconded by Council Filio. Anything further from the committee, public? Seeing none, all in favor? That would be unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda, item 2, recommendations regarding invasive species education and management, coming from the Conservation Commission. Gentlemen?
Thank you, councilors. Sparky Von Plinsky, 18 Allen Court, and also Chair of the Conservation Commission.
Bobby Williams, 66 North Lincoln Street. I'm the city councilor on the Conservation Commission.
Thank you.
So I want to start real quickly with, it was brought to my attention that not everybody knows what an invasive species is. And so let's do a quick overview. I promise I won't get into botany or anything like that. Mainly because I'm not a botanist. So an invasive species is basically any species that comes in, is non-native to an area, and then can outcompete the native species. That can be a plant, it can be an insect, it can be a mammal, it can be basically any type of species. What we are focused on mostly are plant species because they're very obvious and give us the best chance at success. So for some examples of invasive species might be, if you're familiar with a Norway maple or well, Norway maple is a good example because They come in, they leaf earlier in the season, and they hold their leaves later in the season. That means they outcompete native sugar maples and silver maples, and they don't make very good syrup. So it's definitely a problem, and they will take over entire tracts of forest. Those are an easy one because they're huge. Smaller plants like Japanese knotweed, Oriental bittersweet, these kind of things, once you see them, you can't unsee them. You drive down Maple Ave, once you know what Japanese knotweed looks like, that's all you see. If you walk down the rail trail, once you know what buckthorn looks like, once you know what bittersweet looks like, you can't unsee it. And they're everywhere. And that's the point of our letter, is that this is starting to become a real problem, because once those invasive species outcompete native species, those native species can go extinct, certainly locally, but they can definitely go extinct overall. So we have a few people here to talk, but I wanted to hit a couple of the points real quickly. The letter that we put together covers what we had rather lengthy pair of discussions at the commission. But one of the things that kept coming up was that there needs to be a single point of contact at the city for dealing with invasive species. There'll be people talking about calling into the city and saying, hey, I see this invasive species, what do I do about it? And because there was not a single point of contact, either that didn't get to the right person, or if it did get handled, it got handled in a way that wasn't productive for eliminating the species. The other thing that I want to drive home is that any solution needs to be a kind of a public-private partnership. And I mean that we have a huge group of wonderful gardeners and horticulturists, people who are ready to help and willing to help and able to help. And they really need to have that coordination to try to make that happen. So it doesn't have to be something where we just hand it off to the city and the city takes care of everything. I think this is something that can be a solution across the board. Bobby, if you...
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that summary. I've been worried about this invasive species problem since I was elected. In fact, one of the reasons I got elected was to do something about invasive species. I got myself nominated to the Conservation Commission, and then I convinced people on the Conservation Commission that this was a real problem, and got their permission to start a regular program of removing invasive species on a volunteer basis. And every year for the past about 4 years, we've had 5 or 6 days where we go out and we pull Japanese knotweed, or we take care of Oriental bittersweet. And there's a couple people on that panel who've joined us, and it's been good. It's been a very good way to educate the public. I've certainly been educated myself about the problem. But one thing I've realized is that just the scale of the issue is a lot bigger than what me and whatever volunteers I can scare up are able to do. This really needs the city's institutional power to understand where the problems are, come up with long-term plans for dealing with this problem, for organizing volunteers in a way that's better than what I can do. If anybody knows how organized I am, I'm not the person to be organizing volunteers. But this is a serious problem. I'm very grateful. The last time Sparky and I were here, we were talking about trees and bringing a street tree program to Keene, and I'm very grateful that that has been funded for next year. But as we are funding street trees, we need to realize we have something that's out there killing trees. And, if we can, make a better effort of, containing the bittersweet vines that wind their way around trees and choke them and make them die far sooner than they're supposed to, that's a real savings that we're going to have in not having to replace some trees. So this is a big problem. it's more than just we on the Conservation Commission can handle. I do think there needs to be someone in the city whose responsibility it is to know about this and to be able to direct resources and volunteers at this problem of invasive species. So that's, thank you.
Thank you. Committee questions? I have one. How do you get rid of knotweed?
You go back year after year and pull it out, or
Just
you
keep pulling.
can use herbicide, but we don't play with herbicide and volunteers, so.
Okay, I'll ask you about the herbicide off camera. Yes, Counselor.
Thank you, and thanks for this letter and presentation. Councilor Tobin and I were out there. I see Councilor Haas in the back as well. We spent a night pulling knotweed in the Robin Hood Park area, and I was to the point of just to keep pulling it. I mean, I was surprised at the amount of knotweed. I think this was year 3, 4 that
3 or 4, yeah.
and it's a problem that is not going away on its own, and that was very clear to me immediately. I guess the question that I would have is, and I don't know kind of what this looks like. Is there grant funding that is available specific for this sort of project or program, or even potentially for the point of contact person? I guess, is there a way to do some of this in a way that minimizes the impact on the taxpayer?
So, well, if you have,
Go ahead.
I can't answer that question entirely about as far as grant funding and everything, but there are definitely resources available. As far as some aspects of an idea would be education for city staff, for citizens, and those things are available. UNH has some resources available. They have what is it called?
Extension puts on a class.
Yeah, it's like invasive species boot camp
The
type of
academy.
thing. Yeah, and so there are plenty of education resources. Now, as far as funding a position, I can't speak intelligently about that, though. Some people would say I can't speak intelligently about many things, but
Thank you. Yep.
This is more of a comment. I just want to thank Councilor Williams for his efforts on that campaign, volunteer campaign. I have unfortunately never been able to attend one of those evenings and days, but I always have fear of missing out because I always see after the fact, and you guys do amazing work. It's very much needed in the city, and everyone usually is raving about how much fun they had doing that. So don't cut yourself short. And I also, with these recommendations, I'm in support of them. I do have some questions similar to Councilor Favelis about funding the point of contact, but I definitely think it is necessary, and I'm not sure if city staff has gone that far to think about it, but I'd like to hear more about that at a later date, for sure.
Anything else? Any public questions, comments? Coming forth.
Hi, my name is Bob Milliken, 30 Allen Court. I am currently on the Hogback Mountain Conservation Group that we are dealing with invasive species over there. I've joined these guys recently and hoping to take care of our own neighborhood here. One thing I have noticed in the city is that some of these invasive species are very dangerous to people as well. There's it's called wild chervil and wild parsnips. I was so proud that there was none of that over here across the river, and then one day on one of my walks I saw some. And this plant is a type of plant that the seeds will fall off and it'll take 2 years to germinate. So even though you see the plant and you pull the plant, 2 years from now those seeds that are in the ground could come back up. It's one of the plants too, both of those plants, that you have to actually wear protection to pull. It's similar to poison ivy, but it's a beautiful flower. You get the sap on your arm or your legs or something, and you get like a second-degree burn. It is in the city now, and it's great what these guys have been doing. We've been doing it for now 5 years over in Vermont. And the section of Route 9 that we've cleared, the first year it was like a group of 15 people doing it. Last year, we only had 4 of us out there, and we're picking those plants out manually. So there is hope. Get the volunteers out there, and I definitely support these guys and hope you do too. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else want to speak to the issue? Yes, sir.
Hi, Duncan Watson, Assistant Public Works Director. I agree with everything that Councilor Williams and Chair of the Conservation Commission, Von Plinsky, have said, and this is a huge problem, and it's not going to be easily solved. Frankly, the amount of resources that it would take to deal with this in an effective manner would overwhelm the city's budget. But one of the things that we can do is we can learn about the issue and develop best management practices to prevent more of these invasive species from getting hold. As far as a point of contact, I think that that's probably logically going to go into the Public Works Department and the Highway Division, and that we're going to be doing some work on getting to better understand the scope of the problem. But as I said before, we back when John McLean was city manager, I remember Court Blomquist and I, the former Public Works Director, developed a capital project to deal with the emerald ash borer by itself, just as one invasive species. And when we got done with putting the numbers together, it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars over multiple years. The question really is, to what effect? I mean, back in 2005, when my property was flooded by the floods that came in, my riverbanks are just covered with Japanese knotweed, and I have been personally out there summer after summer trying to deal with this Japanese knotweed, and it's a losing battle, I'm telling you. These plants are like apex predators, and once they get a hold of something, they're tough to get rid of. And as people who have experienced this before know, even when you do a removal, we've done an experimental removal on Beaver Brook on several locations, one by Carpenter Field, the other down by the former Kingsbury property. And even with some success in those areas, I still see that plant starting to come back now and repopulate. So it's a pervasive problem that we're going to require long-term overarching solutions, which I'm not sure how realistic some of those are.
Oh, thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for you guys.
Councilor Ed Haas.
Thank you, Ed Haas. Do you have any examples of cities of our size that have been successful or run successful programs? I mean, we know there's a lot of solutions and we know there's ways to deal with it, but is anybody really grappling with this on our scale? Thank you.
I can't point to any examples, but I can definitely tell you that everyone is grappling with this issue. This is not just a Keene issue. As Bob said, the plant, or as he alluded to, the plant doesn't care if it crosses a river, if it rides a tire up into the next town. It's a tough battle. I'm sure there are case studies out there for Keene-sized towns. I don't know of any.
That would be interesting to hear. I've seen knotweed grow through asphalt. It's pretty astounding.
Right.
I'm sure. So anything further? Yep, Laura.
So I've done way too much research on this since I started going and pulling, going to these polls. And there are towns in New Hampshire who have invasive species management plans, which I assume has a point of contact. There are places in Massachusetts, I believe they went through and they had, I believe they pulled or had a big project to get rid of knotweed there. I've called, so kind of expanding beyond that, and to kind of attest to the education piece, the first time after I went and pulled that, I went home and I found some in the yard next to me, and now periodically I go to United Way and I'm pulling their knotweed every few days because that's how fast it comes back. And usually, I guess, after 5 years of persistence, you can get rid of it. but also in terms of the vines, I've noticed a lot hanging on the wires. So they climb the wires, and when I tried calling to have that removed, they came and they cut it, but they actually just keep it there. They told me to call the city to have it removed, so,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay. Well,
sorry.
thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy Bohanna, Deputy City Manager, and I just want to concur, Duncan Watson, our Assistant Public Works Director, I know mentioned the Public Works side and the Parks side. We now, Kara Fisk-Hennessy, has been working towards, with the Conservation Commission, creating some educational events that will be happening in the spring related to, specifically Ashwillet River Park. We're working with some volunteers related to Russell Park and the maintenance needed along Beaver Brook. But I think if you go into Ashwillet River Park and just beyond where the bridge is, you'll see like an opening, and that was all knotweed. And the Friends of Ashwillet River Park have really been doing a great job over the last 3-4 years of trying to maintain that specific area. And that's a great example of, if you work at it year after year, that's what it can continue to look like and manage it. And I would say the Ashwillet River Park Advisory Board is really, they've struggled just because of the amount of it, but they continue to do due diligence in their efforts. So a lot is happening, and I commend the Conservation Commission for bringing this forward.
Good. Thank you. And, yes, sir. Jim?
The last thing I thought I was going to talk about tonight is Japanese knotweed. But I can tell you, it is a tremendously evasive thing. And there is not going to be any easy solution. It's going to be mostly hand labor. There's nothing that can stop this thing. As a person who bikes up and down the road all the time, and I'm a trout fisherman up on the Ashwillet, it is literally taken over the shorelines, where sometimes you can't even get to the shore to fish because there's so much knotweed. In addition to that, it also grows along the road, and it actually becomes a danger to public because you can't see around a corner because there's so much knotweed growing. And the DOT, you know, they only have so much money. And they find a few corners that are so bad, they actually will rip it up and then put down matting in order for it to not grow. And I used to discuss it with them, and I would say, like, you know, do you have somebody that can help with this or handle this? And it's like, well, we only had one guy with a pesticide license, but he's not working here anymore, so, you know, we can't have this thing. And it started out 10 years ago. It's like, what is this stuff growing? And I would be like going to places where I'm fishing, and I'm like, it's like going through a jungle. It's crazy. And it's not just like in the discussions we're having here, it's like there, here, there. It is everywhere. I go to Maine on vacation, it's all over there. You go to all the places, it's really, really evasive. And you can't kill it. I mean, the only way to kill it, pesticides, I'm not sure, is the solution. It's labor. You have to pick and choose the areas that you think are most important to you and put your labor there, because other than that, you're virtually defenseless. But it's labor and money. It's not study this or that. I know the town of Nashua had it in their downtown where the river goes through. It became evasive there, and they spent a lot of money to get it out of, you know, the sightly areas of the town. But it is horrible. It is horrible. I'd put that almost as the #1 invasive species there is. That other stuff you were talking about, that's pretty bad too. I have apple trees, and they just almost die because I have to keep cutting it down of that bittersweet. But the Japanese knotweed, I'm telling you, once you see it, you go, oh, that's what it is, you'll be going everywhere going, oh, it's there, oh, it's there, oh, it's there, oh, it's there. Anyway, enough said.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Heather Atwell from Pearl Street. I also did not come tonight to talk about knotweed, but I did want to mention, I have a summer house in upstate New York, and about 10 years ago, they had a program to get rid of knotweed, and so I just Googled it, and it was through this, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I have a document, and I'd be happy to send it because at the time, my neighbor he said, oh, yeah, we've got all these trees, and I'm getting this wood chopper to get rid of the trees because they just keep growing. And then my mom had talked to a friend of hers who was a volunteer to get rid of this, and an environmentalist. So this is like, they use chemicals, but it's an injection into the, anyway, and I'm sure you have mothers who tell you about things. It took me a really long time for me to like zero in on what she was saying, but the knotweed thing and the injection thing got rid of the knotweed and it did not return. And the bad thing was like chopping up the chips, like not a way to get knotweed to stop growing because that just kind of spreads it more. So I'd be happy to share that. I haven't read it. I just Googled New York. This is a work plan for the Adirondack Park. So I'll just send it to you, and
Yeah,
then
give it to,
you can do something.
give it to one of them. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Craig Fulton, new resident to Keene as of 6 months ago. I was Director of Public Works for the City of Port Angeles in Washington. We had Scotch broom, well, all of Washington and Oregon has Scotch broom problem, and the only way we could deal with it was an effort with the state. The county led the effort. The University of Washington Extension Office provided the expertise. And then the city with their park and recreations and transportation. All this together, we were able to tackle, as they said, only tackle critical areas because Scotch broom, you can't control it. But you need to look at state, county, city, and universities. And then, of course, the volunteer effort, which takes quite a bit of planning to get them out there. But that's my recommendations.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Get out there and start pulling, right? Not now. Yes.
I move to recommend accepting the recommendations regarding invasive species and education management as informational.
Second. Motion's made and seconded, second by Council Filio. Anything further, committee, public? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3 on the agenda, communication from Tim Pip, B's T's Screen Printing, regarding to add the necessary infrastructure to accommodate banners across Main Street. Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Tim Pip. I'm the owner of B's Tees, store on Main Street. I've been there for 10 years, and over the last 10 years, I've talked with numerous downtown business owners about potentially putting up a banner across Main Street. So my proposal tonight is for the installation of poles to hold a banner. Right now, there's existing light poles that my proposal is that we put them in the existing place, right in front of Ted's and the Works. It would span across Main Street. The street is about 75 feet wide, and the poles were 75 feet wide apart. The purpose of the banner, or the poles, are to hold a banner to promote events mostly to promote events. Most banners like this are prohibited for, logos or anything like that, business use. But to promote events and other things that are happening down Main Street. One of the reasons that I'm bringing this up now is with the downtown revitalization. I think it's a great time to do that. I see a banner saying "we're open" kind of thing. So that's really what got it back to me and talking with other downtown business owners. I think it's a pretty simple ask. We're going to be replacing the lights anyway, so we could replace them with this. So I think that's really all.
Okay. What do you think? Go to Public Works?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucia, Public Works. This was a very interesting suggestion, and quite honestly, I didn't know much about these banner systems before the suggestion came about. Since we got your letter, I've been able to reach out to some manufacturers that make these kinds of systems, and so we've learned a little bit about them. The systems themselves aren't, I was actually kind of surprised. They were more affordable than I was expecting. About $25,000 to $30,000 for the materials, not including installation for a system like we sized for what we have there. About 75 feet or so across. Just to be clear, the light poles that are currently used downtown wouldn't be able to support something like this. Because that banner is so big and it's high up in the air, catches a lot of wind, and the poles have to be designed to carry that load. So the poles themselves are fairly substantial. The other thing to keep in mind is these systems, basically, you'd have two poles on each side with taunt guy wires on the top and the bottom of the banner. The banners themselves slide in and out from the ends, and there's a pulley system to retract and extend them, as you want to change them for the seasons and what have you. Gem Graphics gave me a budgetary number for the actual graphics themselves of about $1,400 per graphic. So I would imagine, 10 or 12 of these a year, that's something that we would have to budget for if the council wanted to go in that direction. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's what I've been able to learn so far.
Well, just to identify, you print them too.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
And I know this sounds self-serving. It's not. I'm not going to give my number. We're friends with Gem Graphics. But the idea behind these in most places, so a lot of different cities all over New England, all over the country do these over their main streets. Concord has one. I believe Portsmouth still has one or has one. Brattleboro definitely has one. Manchester, and then a bunch of places all in Vermont. The cities aren't buying the banners and hanging them. It's the event is buying the banner with sponsorship and hanging the banner. Obviously, the city would have to have some part in hanging, but I think that expense is different.
Okay, yeah, and I should apologize. I probably shouldn't have name dropped Gem Graphics. I just reached out to them to try to get myself smart on this topic. So.
Okay, I just wanted to get you the ad exposure there too.
Next time.
But as I understand it, these cables, they're not little thin cables. They're kind of substantial.
No, these would be like 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch stainless steel cables. They're permanently affixed there. So this would be, permanent, rugged infrastructure that would be in place.
And the word is permanent. They
Right.
stay up whether there's a banner or not.
Correct.
Would that be problematic for tall trucks or?
So, no, they would have to be high enough that they would be above the clearance heights. So, DOT has standards for how high things have to be above the roadway, and we would be above that. It's just, something that's going to be there. It might not be something that's the most attractive thing when there isn't a banner hanging on it. People might be like, why is that up there?
Yeah. And another way to attach would be to attach to the buildings.
Boy,
I'm
I'll let the city attorney weigh in on the legality of attaching to people's buildings and the indemnification language that we'd have to have for that.
I'm just posing a bunch of questions because I think ultimately this needs a whole lot of thought and education before we're saying, let's go do it. Not the least of which, the whole downtown plan needs to get factored into it. So I'm just posing some questions for staff consideration. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question, and I'm not sure if you know the answer to this or not, but you mentioned some other cities that have a similar system. And something that comes to mind for me is kind of what the process looks like for being approved to hang a banner. I know that we're thinking about, or at least I'm thinking about downtown events and that sort of
I
thing.
have Concord and Manchester's right here.
Okay, that would be helpful to know because I'm thinking of Concord actually as a good example right now of where there has been some controversy over what can and can't be displayed, and I'm interested in keeping Keene out of headlines for that sort of reason. So.
And Manchester's is a little bit longer, and I'm more familiar with that one because we work in Manchester and actually do their banners over Elm Street. but it's laid out pretty much the same. It tells you what you can and cannot put on there, the weight of the banner, the size of the banner, all that kind of stuff. So,
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, Counselor.
This is a question for Public Works, but more so just for historical background information. Can you just briefly explain the installation of the message board in front of the post office and how that would kind of differ from this as far as process for, getting your information, your event listed there and whatnot? And
I think I'm going to defer to the manager on
Punt
this
it
one.
over?
I'm not involved in managing that bulletin board. I believe that's the clerk's office.
all right, perfect, yeah.
I could see that the question of content is probably spelled out pretty clearly in those two agreements. You start walking into freedom of speech and,
yeah. It doesn't allow for just specific business logos, so I can just throw up my logo and call it a day. It has to be geared around an event of some sort, so. And then, yeah, there's rules.
did you have?
You sort of made my point. I just wanted to flag where I'm paying attention to this for the First Amendment reasons. There's a lot of nuance around it. The Supreme Court did a case last year that was related to it, so it's a pretty legal-heavy topic, which I love talking about. We're happy to work on it, but we're just talking about the construction tonight. We'll talk about the process later.
Good point. Yeah, Counselor.
Yeah, a couple of issues. One, having been a lifetime resident here, I go back many years, especially at Christmas, downtown used to have cables virtually across every main street and 3 or 4 of them down Main Street. They went across Washington, Court. If you look at the old pictures of downtown Keene during Christmas, virtually, from north to south, there was poles or cables across all of Main Street going down. It'd be something to look into. I was young. I don't remember if they were permanent and then they took them down after the holidays or they stayed there and just waited for the next holiday to go up. So Keene has done something similar to that. And also I mentioned Concord, which my wife and I have a tendency to drive through Concord quite a bit just when we get out of town. And when you pull into Portsmouth, before you go into downtown, they do have one of those banners going across both ends of Main Street as you go in. And it is a phenomenal advertising mechanism, because we'll drive into Concord not expecting anything, and then you'll look, it'll tell about a big downtown event coming up in a couple of weeks or whatever. And if you're from out of town, it's not something you would normally look into. But you drive through and you see the banner in front of me and say, well, that's a great idea. Why don't we go back in a couple of weeks and enjoy that? So they work. They work because, I'm proof they work, because we went back up to Concord to one of their events. So I think it definitely has viability. Obviously, this probably would get tied in to the infrastructure project, which we'll be talking about later. And I think that's probably, if we accept it as informational or more time, or however we want to word it in government, kind of slide it over to the infrastructure project to tie it in with that, because obviously that's going to get tied in with it, whatever we do.
Yeah, I think the background notes are picking up all these questions and comments, and more work for city staff, and then we can pick it up, perhaps. But informational, I think, is somewhat appropriate. Thank you for bringing it in. It's a good creative idea, certainly. And I think the cable is still up across Lamson Street for one of those signs, so you could go for that. Any further questions for Mr. Pipp? Any public questions, comments, or whatnot? Okay. Oh, coming up.
Hi, everybody. Ted McGreer, 115 Main Street. I do own the property at 115. Roger Weinreich, who owns the building across the street, he and I have been talking about doing this for years the way it used to be. You entered Keene, the city was welcoming guests and visitors with this beautiful banner that would announce Pumpkin Fest or Pancake Dinner or Supper or whatever you have. I'm a big fan of that. We're proud of this downtown, and I think this is an awesome opportunity to kind of roll back the years and bring back some of that nostalgia to our city that we love. And we have a really unique downtown. We always talk about this. People come in from all over the place and they love our city. So I really want you to weigh in on this. I don't know if it needs to be a $20,000 cable system. That seems a little scary, but I think we really got to look into this, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, please.
Okay, I move we recommend the communication regarding banners as informational, and have city staff report back to MSFI as to their findings.
Second.
Second.
Yep, Counselor Tobin for the second. You get the next one. Anything further, committee, public? All in favor? That is unanimous. Yes, we're all there. Okay. As I said previously, the idea of moving up a couple of the later items so that we have all the downtown discussion after that. So that would be to move item 6, request for a marked crosswalk at the intersection of West Street and Pearl Street. Public Works Director. Boy, you're working hard tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that there's some folks in the audience that actually requested this that may want to speak first.
Fine.
If is that true?
Sure, yeah. So this is why I came tonight,
Good evening.
not to talk about knotweed. Heather Atwell, Pearl Street. And I submitted this as a see, click it, fix it, whatever thing. I live on Pearl Street. I'd been seeing those signs for about 2 years, and finally I did it. And it was because I was sitting at the crosswalk one day. Am I supposed to talk about what I'm proposing, or does everybody?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm just proposing, and I know this whole the whole downtown thing might supersede this, but, so I live on Pearl Street, and there are a lot of people who walk from that hotel on West Street, just across from Pearl Street, all the way down Pearl Street to where Walmart and Target is. They're always walking back and forth, back and forth. And so the new car wash that was just built next to that new coffee shop, they were putting in these like beautiful sidewalks and greenery, and it was just happening for a really long time. And meanwhile, I was just thinking, like, for years I wanted to submit a see, click, fix thing for this, because I would come up to that stop sign and it's 4 lanes, and these poor people are like running across to get to where they have to work or whatever. And it seems, and I know, like, when I first submitted the ticket, the person said, this is part of something that's happening maybe in 2027 and this and that. And then when they started putting the sidewalks in with the car wash, I was like, can't we just like put something here? Because these poor people have to, like, you know, it looks very dangerous and scary. So I just thought I would submit it. And then I realized it was going to be brought up in front of people. So I was like, oh, I should probably come here. And then I found myself talking, and I don't even know what you'll do with it, but that's how I feel about it. And my neighbor came with me. Thank you.
Okay, and there's no knotweed involved. That's good. And if your neighbor would like to speak?
Hi, I'm Michelle Knapp. I live on Pearl Street as well. I'm sure many of you have traveled West Street at one point or another and see the sheer number of cars that go back and forth across West Street all day long. I see pretty much daily people trying to cross from West Street to Pearl Street, cross those 4 lanes. People with children, people with baby carriages, people on bikes, people just pedestrians walking. And frankly, it's really, really terrifying, because the sheer speed at which people currently travel on West Street is frankly pretty scary. I do realize that there are multiple crosswalks. One is far down by the Hannaford Plaza, and the other one is near CVS. But it just seems like, one, it's an accident waiting to happen with an accident there. 2, it feels like it would also potentially slow down the traffic on West Street if there was a lighted crosswalk there. So that's all I have to say about that. But I do see it daily, multiple times a day even, people trying to cross.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucia, Public Works Director. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Atwood, for joining us tonight. The request that she submitted was anonymous, so we weren't able to contact her, so I'm glad that she got wind of the item on the agenda and is here tonight. I should also thank her for a couple of plugs for our C-Click Fix system. Appreciate that. Thank you. It is a great tool that we use, and we're very happy with folks are really kind of catching on and submitting a lot of requests through it. So, yeah, back in the end of October, we received her request. I think you all know that generally Public Works is recommending against more mid-block crossings. They do tend to have some problems. They oftentimes drivers aren't expecting to find people crossing in the middle of a block, between intersections. So as a result, you a lot of times can see some low driver compliance, like drivers won't yield to the pedestrians in the crosswalk. So they're concerned for that reason. But as we typically do with any of these traffic calming, traffic control requests, we start out by doing an engineering study. Basically, the engineering team will go out, look at the circumstances, look at the data that we have available already, or they'll collect more data if needed, and determine if the request is appropriate for this location. And at this location, I will say that we do agree that this makes a lot of sense. MUTCD, the Manual and Uniform Traffic Control Devices, is sort of our Bible for how we do traffic controls. And it does have a number of criteria that we should look at when considering a mid-block crossing, or what it refers to as a marked crosswalk at an uncontrolled location, mid-block crossing for everybody else. So things like the distance to the next legally marked crosswalk, traffic volumes, numbers of lanes that need to be crossed, pedestrian volumes, all of these things, traffic speeds, all of these things are weighed in. And in this instance, we have a 4-lane roadway with no median, so it's a long distance that pedestrians have to cross safely. That can be challenging specifically for folks with limited mobility. It can take a long time to get across that distance. There's no median for them to stop and take a break in between. And there's also a long distance between the next available crosswalk. So it's 800 feet to the west at the plaza entrance and 1,100 feet to the east, which is at the Island Street intersection. Traffic volumes, the 2023 DOT measurements at the Ashwillet River Bridge averaged about 19,000 vehicles per day. So it is a very, very high volume roadway, as you all know. The standard says that roadway has 4 or more lanes of traffic without a raised median or pedestrian refuge, and an ADT, average daily traffic, over 12,000, should also consider conspicuity enhancements, things like the pedestrian beacons that we use, the pedestrian activated beacons, additional signage, that sort of thing. So in this instance, we are recommending that crosswalk be installed and that it be upgraded with our RFB pedestrian beacon system. So that's our recommendation. If the committee and the council ultimately agree with that recommendation, we will be putting in a request to the FOP to fund that flashing beacon. The price quote for it is going to be a little bit less than it normally would. We were able to basically harvest some spare parts from other installations where we didn't need the signs and the beacons that were installed. So we have some of the parts already. So it'll be about $7,500 to install that beacon system for this crosswalk. And we would propose to do that with city forces once the weather permits.
Very good. A lot of background information there. Very good, yeah.
Question. Yeah, all of us drive West Street a lot, so we see that, and we've seen those take their lives in the hand crossing the street pretty much every day. My question to you is, whereas Lower Main Street, you kind of get your halfway safety point,
Right.
There is no halfway safety point on West Street. It concerns me that somebody might get hung out to dry being out there. So, I mean, I know it's not in the budget to put a median down the middle, and of course, that's a whole other argument for another day. but is there a way at least to where the yellow line goes down to just go around a little bit like that, almost like a halfway point? Because like I said, that can be pretty, I've crossed it a couple of times, and yeah, you do get out into the middle, and you're in Never Land if cars are coming the other way. Let's face it, it's hard to, as you're crossing the street, and the beacons will help because it'll draw attention. But when you've got 4 lanes zipping, it's hard for one person to judge how long it's going to take to get across. So my question is there any way we can make something in the middle a little bit safer, even if it's just paint, if somebody gets kind of halfway across?
So that wouldn't be my recommendation, only because right now the lane widths, the curb to curb width, really wouldn't accommodate a substantial enough median in that area, without really narrowing the lanes more than you would like to see, frankly.
Okay.
But what we can do is the timing on those beacons can be adjusted based on the crossing distance.
Okay.
So it'll be programmed so that a person with, not the best mobility still has time to crosswalk the crosswalk while it's still flashing.
Okay.
And again, I'm sure I've mentioned this in the past, but those beacons don't change state law. Drivers are still required to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk, whether there's a beacon there or not.
Right.
All they do really is draw the driver's attention and make sure that those pedestrians have a better chance of being seen.
Okay.
So, once that pedestrian is in the crosswalk, folks have stopped to let them cross. It's incumbent on the drivers to wait until that pedestrian makes it across the roadway.
I understand what drivers are supposed to do, but as we've seen up on Route 9, they don't always do what they're supposed to do.
Understood.
So it's more of a safety concern when the driver doesn't do what they're supposed to do.
The other thing I will point out, and Heather mentioned this as well, this project, this area is slated for much more significant improvements in the near future, right? So I know 2030 doesn't sound like the near future, but we're going to start designing that project in just a couple of years.
I favor it. I just want to make sure we make it as safe as we possibly can until the major developments happen in a few years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, committee, public?
Words right out of my mouth.
Motion.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to install a crosswalk and pedestrian beacons on West Street at the intersection of Pearl Street.
Second.
Motion's been made, second by Council Filio. Anything further? What? Oh, someone is. Thank you.
Hi, Ian Matheson, 11 Court Street, avid pedestrian. I share the concerns that Councilor Filliot raised with people stopping. Fairly often, even with these illuminated crosswalks, people don't stop. I think there's some mentality out there that if I'm on the other side of the street and you're traveling in the opposite direction, I don't have to stop for you because you're not in my lane yet. I'm curious if maybe we could install something similar to what we have on Washington and Vernon Street, where it actually stops traffic with a red light. Just concerned about that 4 lanes of traffic that people have to traverse through. And not sure if the actual yellow flashing hazard lights will prevent any type of accident or injury.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think your concern is well taken. I'm going to assume that the process of getting a stoplight in the middle of West Street would be a lot more problematic than this quick and simple solution.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Whether it's a full stop control system or even just a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is a little bit different. We don't have any here in the city, but they're signal systems that go over the roadway, and they actually have stoplights associated with them, but they're pedestrian activated. Those systems are significantly more expensive. In that area, we may have to have that reviewed by the DOT because it's close to the state highway. There's a certain point on West Street where the DOT has a review prerogative for our improvements, and I don't know exactly where that is. It might be the Ashwillet River Bridge, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, that would be a much more involved project and a lot more costly.
Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion, though, sir. Anything further, committee or public? All in favor of the motion? That would be unanimous. Thank you. Okay, and now we're getting to the main event of the evening. Almost. Heritage Commission. What, did I miss one?
Number 7.
7?
7.
Oh, you're right, you're right.
7.
Wrong, that's why you're here. Okay, item 7, proposal for a stop sign at intersection of Jennison Street and Foster Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, Brian Roth, City Engineer.
Any questions?
I'm trying to pull up our visual for this, trying to put you there, but hold on. This one, okay. PDF, okay, here we go. For this agenda item, you should have an image in your package. I pulled it up on the screen. Tell me when you could see it.
Well, you could tell us about it.
Oh, thanks. Geez. Well, similar to the last agenda item, this is a request that was received by the public. Similarly, the engineering division looked at this intersection and determined that what was being requested, a stop sign added on Jellison at the intersection with Foster Street at the northernmost end of Jellison Street, was in fact warranted based on the MUTC manual, specifically section 2B04-09B, due to the obscured sight line at the intersection looking west towards eastbound traffic on Foster Street. So to orientate you on this visual on the screen, the lower is an overhead view of the intersection of Foster and Jellison. If you look at the two images above that, it's the view at the intersection, both left and right. As you can see, there's a fence on private property that completely obscures the view of traffic coming eastbound on Foster Street. We went out there and stayed out there for a little bit and noticed some cars just whip around that corner, and you can't see anyone coming. So based on that and based on our engineering assessment of this in conformance with the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, we are recommending that the committee recommend that the city manager be directed to draft an ordinance adding a stop sign at this location. With that, I'd turn it over to any questions you have.
The big discussion would be actually on the ordinance. So, any questions? Otherwise, then, is the city manager or the city attorney drafts this ordinance?
It's going to be Public Works, draft the ordinance. City attorney reviews it.
Okay. So it would be, as the motion it says to us, that, Jacob, you're up.
Move to recommend that the city manager be directed to draft an ordinance adding a stop sign at the northernmost end of Jennison Street at its intersection with Foster Street.
Second.
Seconded by Council Filio. And again, the big discussion and analysis really would be at the ordinance time, but the committee seems interested. Anyone from the public want to weigh in? Anything from the committee?
Just real quick, because I know that I've been on the losing side of a vote on this committee before related to stop signs at intersections. This one, to me, from the images that I'm seeing here, and this is an intersection in my ward, makes perfect sense because of the engineering setup here. So I don't think this is necessarily just a driver behavior problem. Certainly in this area, I don't know that we're talking about speed or reckless driving in the same way that we are at some of the four-way intersections that we've talked about. This is looks essentially like a blind drive kind of situation to me, and so I will await to see exactly what the ordinance says when it comes back and talk about it then, but definitely interested.
Anything further? Okay, we have motion seconded. Yes, we do.
Yep.
All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, now, talking about downtown. And again, we're really talking about design issues and details on the next two items. And also, it's not just design features. Once we get into the Stantec presentation, we're also talking about communication and the timing of the construction and the ombudsman, and it's going to pick up some of the issues that were brought forward at the Finance Committee meeting. But we are primarily talking about design. So, item 4, we have a communication from the Heritage Commission, design details and downtown project. And who is presenting for the?
I'm not sure that anyone is presenting. This is a letter of information from the Heritage Commission regarding their review of the project.
Okay.
I think anyone
good.
here is from Heritage.
Well, it's some comments, but I want to recognize anyone if they were sitting here.
Yeah.
But therefore, motion,
I move to recommend regarding design details in the downtown infrastructure project to be accepted as informational.
Second.
motion's made and seconded.
Mr. Chair, just for a little context, I will say our consultant did meet with the Heritage Commission while they were deliberating and discussing these things. So the options and the choices that we're going to be showing you in a few minutes have been sort of informed by some of this feedback that we've already received. Where there are recommendations and suggestions from the Heritage Commission that we may or may not agree with, I'll kind of point that out.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Talking about, yep, we're all set with that one. Moving on to item 5. Yes.
We got a motion on the floor.
Thank you. Keep me on schedule. Anything, yes, sir.
Jay Kahn, Mayor. Want to just suggest that these comments, I think, are significant. And when I came to Keene many years ago, took up my position at Keene State, the design concepts that were brought into the Main Street design were the guiding principles for the Appian Way and the quadrangle and a lot of the elements that were brought into the downtown design are guides. And as they mentioned, Ashwillet River Park is another example of where downtown designs were picked up. So I think their suggestion that we recognize some of those principles that have been brought forward are worth preserving in this iteration of the downtown design. So you'll take that up and it will be informational. But I wanted to point out that these are significant principles that get carried forth by others in the city that are making their design decisions.
Thank you. Okay, all ready? All in favor? Thank you. Now, moving on to item 5. This is, again, the discussion of design details for the downtown infrastructure project. Question, City Manager, do you want to speak first, or hand it
Sure,
right
I'd be
over?
happy to introduce. So these are the final design decisions before bidding out the downtown infrastructure project. And they include decisions related to things like the type of seating you would like, the type of pavement or stamped concrete, or whether you want color in certain areas, how you want the design of Railroad Square to look in terms of the materials that are being used, and the design for the Gilbo Ave area regarding the materials that will be used. So these are not physical design, these are more of the last pieces of aesthetic design issues. And the Stantec is going to walk you through them, and they will break them apart for you so that you can get a consensus from the committee as you go through each of them. And there's a recommendation from the Public Works Department also when you make those decisions. And the Public Works recommendation is based on durability and maintenance issues that are tied to different materials that may be chosen. And so with that, really, we can turn it over to the Stantec team, I think.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam Manager. And Councilor Greenwald and members of the MSFI committee, I'm Ed Roberge. I'm a civil engineer with Stantec and part of the design team here. I'm with Bob Corning. He's our design team lead, and Dave McNamara. He's our associate project manager for the project here as well. We're really pleased to make way and look at some real specific final design details. Let me just make sure I can advance here. You know, the project has been ongoing for a while, and we got through our preliminary design some time ago, and now, as we promised in the past, there's a number of design details when we get into the real detail of the project itself that we want to kind of flesh out tonight. So, as the manager had indicated, we'll talk about a number of factors that encompass all phases of the project. When I say phases, we've been talking about the project in specific areas like Main Street as one area, the Gilbo, the Railroad Square area, and then Central Square. So we'll follow that same theme as you've seen before. And this will just give you some information, and we brought these graphics just in case we have to go back and look in details. This is your project here, and this is Main Street. So from where we left off at preliminary design at our last meeting, these are some of the same details that you've seen before. These colored renderings are just capturing bits and pieces of the corridor. This happens to be a snapshot between Railroad Street and Church Street. And it's just pointing out, all of the elements that we'll talk about tonight, which is sidewalk materials, which is tree planters, which is the bike lanes, which is crosswalks, and even the ways to plant trees and seating benches and a whole bunch of details that we hadn't gotten to yet, but will inform our design. We're approaching the 60% completion now on the design package. It's a pretty large, comprehensive package. These details, these selections tonight will help us make our way toward finishing that package set as we continue on. Another snapshot really in the railroad and in Gilbo Avenue area, the raised crosswalk, the raised table, I should say here, with bollards and all of the areas, the two entrances to the Gilbo area as well as Railroad Square. Again, these are just snapshots of what we want to talk about. And here's part of your list right here. These are all and you'll see that we'll go through these decision matrices based on character area, as I mentioned before, but we'll talk about material types and amenities in equipment and different options that you see all listed here. I think the flow of our work would like to get to each of these items, look at some examples, and then have a conversation regarding preferences. And as the manager had mentioned before, Public Works has chimed in. We'll see some of Public Works elements. So we'll bounce around here from a presentation aspect. So I'm going to hand it to Bob right now, and he can start talking about surface treatments on sidewalks. Hey, Bob.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Ed. From a design perspective, the design team has always thought, and as you could see in the renderings, we've always tried for the sidewalk surfaces not to have just a continuous plane or level plane of just plain concrete. We've always thought about the fact that the main pedestrian thoroughfares would be concrete, but that there were opportunities for accents, either along the face of the building, in the furnishing zones, in the strip between the bike lane and the curb. And so we've been looking at different opportunities and different options for those materials and reviewing those with Public Works in terms of durability and maintenance. So certainly the first option would just be a standard concrete. There are opportunities to do different kinds of scoring patterns, different kinds of broom finishes or even potentially exposed aggregate. So that's one alternative. Go to the next slide.
Go to the next slide. Yep.
The other common material that's used in urban conditions is a stamped concrete. And stamped concrete, you can use different patterns, different colors, different textures. And that would probably be in combination with a standard concrete. So as Ed's pointing, there's a stamped concrete edging or a detail strip along the back of the curb in the upper left. And as you can see in the other photos, that's really used as kind of an accent area for different parts of the project. So that would, so a standard concrete mixed with a stamped concrete option would be a second option.
From the perspective of costs, and we'll talk a little bit about costs as we go along between each of these. We can point that out when we get to the decision matrix, but as you imagine, standard concrete versus concrete, and I'm gonna let Andy go. I know, it's.
Yeah. Killed it.
Perfect.
No, he's stuck inside. And if at any point you need me to zoom in on something that you want to detail better, we certainly can do that. So we'll make sure that we fully understand the perspective of costs between each of these. That's a real important point as you look at that.
And then the third option would be, again, a combination of concrete, but then introducing a unit paver, and that could be a brick, it could be a concrete unit paver. We've had a lot of success with these types of paver systems in urban environments. You know, the installation is really important, that they hold up and that they're durable, but obviously that there is some potential maintenance issues in the future, as well as, you know, it is an increased cost for pavers.
And a unit paver, just by definition, it can be either a brick or it can be a concrete paver. Blocks that would be put in either on top of concrete or on a gravel bed that would be firm enough. So this is really what we're trying to do here now, is just to have the conversation on what preferences. And as we go through, I know that we have a number of items. We want to just keep it fresh in mind. And you can see here on this symbol, the small K, the text is a little bit small, but it says Department of Public Works. So this would be the preference, which is option 2, standard and stamped concrete combo. So we just talked about 3 options here. One is standard concrete throughout the entire band of sidewalk, and you saw the different zones before, or the option 2, as I just mentioned, and option 3 would be standard concrete with unit pavers. From a cost perspective, interestingly enough, 1, 2, and 3 is in the order of expense. Obviously, option 3 would be most expensive because of the combination of the unit pavers themselves. Material is a little bit more expensive, but then placement and foundation is a little bit different.
Okay, so to the committee, 1 minute.
Yeah.
We have quite a few decisions to make. So as we're working our way through this, try to state your thoughts, be brief, and you don't have to get into too much discussion. And to members of the public, if you have some strong thought that you would like to communicate, same thing. Just please be brief, because we have a lot of decisions to make. Yes.
I think overall cost is going to be extremely important, because this is the first of many. And we can say, well, option B, whatever, costs a little bit more. But if we do that all the way through, it keeps saying a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. By the time we're done, we're at a lot of bit more. So I think cost is extremely important here. Also, when it comes to downtown sidewalks, having seen and lived here a long time and seen many different variations, I guess it's the KISS, keep it simple, stupid, because we've had variations, and when somebody is, got mobile issues, they're in wheelchair, they're in crutches, whatever. Anytime you have something that's not smooth, it creates a problem for those. So at least in the heavily traveled main area that the pedestrians use, in my opinion, it just should be boring, standard concrete, cost efficient, and very little maintenance. One person's opinion.
Okay, one other issue to stir into that. We are doing this project once, probably, well,
Totally.
it's the last time in my lifetime this is going to happen. I won't live through another one of these projects. Anyway, so we should not cheap out. We need to come up with a good, high-quality project, not to go to the extreme, exactly what Council Filio is saying. Durability is important, cost is important, but the aesthetics, we want to have a project that we're really proud of. Yep.
Thank you. Just real quick, want to say, I think that aside from the cost of the kind of unit paver combo, I recall we had this conversation at the workshop around Railroad Square. I'm thinking about ice, I'm thinking about frost, I'm thinking about snow. And those start off, they look great. And then in New England, after a few winters, I'm worried about them. So I think option 3 should be off the table.
I think so. Yep.
I really like option 2. I like that it creates some sort of separation. It's a clean line, and it also adds texture to the space and some warmth, potentially. I really like that one.
Good, okay. And if someone from the public wants to throw a quick thought in there, put your hand up. And again, you got lots of decisions to make, so speeches are not necessary.
Scoring patterns matter. It can't be a flat concrete. It needs a scoring to it that is a brush finish. You can alternate that in 90-degree directions because panels are not going to go in right sequentially. In any case, the grit and the catch for people who are walking on an icy surface, that is really important.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just shoot down the line once this gentleman speaks.
Craig Fulton, Main Street, and I'm sure Public Works is already thinking about this. There is the option of base bid, when you go out to contract, base bid, and then alternative bid items where you look at those prices for enhanced sidewalks, and then when you get all those prices in, then you add things up and figure out where your budget can maybe add some of those bid alternatives for a higher grade of aesthetically. Could be more design, because you're going to have a sort of a design for that alternative, but we're doing this for school. We're going to have about 10 different bid items, things we want, but things we don't know if we can afford, so we're going to have the contractor price those out, and then we'll add it all up and see what happens.
Good, thank you. Okay, so we'll run down the line. Counselor? Counselor?
I'm comfortable with 2.
2, Filio? And Counselor Tobin?
2.
And chair is 2. So recommendation would go forth is 2, and your opposition is noted. Yes.
Okay. The next item here is the bike path, and there are two options here, as we've talked about before. One is just maintaining, again, the concrete surface. It's already part of the sidewalk regime. You can see here, this is painted concrete. The green obviously is very attractive in terms of meeting the standard of color, not the personal piece, but the required piece. But you can see on the bottom here the integral concrete color. This would be more so if it were part of the concrete in a pigmented color added. So integral, and you can see how that would be, it still would have contrast, it would still be quite visible, but yeah, it's not to the extent of that. On the bituminous side, and one of the biggest differences here, we've talked about this before, is on concrete panel, obviously control joints and expansion joints would be present, and this is the scoring pattern that would be typical. On the bituminous side, it can be continuous. So there's a option here, bituminous, that would be unpainted, or again, the painted component. We would have bike symbols, we would have crosswalks that are crossing that within the walking paths. So you would see that striping on either account, as you can see here. So there's 2 options that we're presenting here. option one, concrete, was the preferred option with Public Works.
You flip back.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I do want to clarify that our recommendation is for the concrete with the integral pigment, not the paint. I know I'm supposed to love the US DOT approved neon green color, but in this case, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it's awfully green. The integral color is a little more subdued, but it still gets the point across that this is a space reserved for the bicyclist. Also, having that integral pigment makes it so it's not going to be a yearly maintenance requirement to go back and paint it every year, which would really be quite expensive. So.
Can you flip back to the picture again?
Yes, I can.
As you may know, I am colorblind, but that is baby poo green. And that's not really what I call it, but for the press, I'll call it baby poo. It is totally not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. And I don't see why it can't be a red color, a brick-like color, perhaps even with stamping in it, so that it, it's a little more cohesive with the downtown. So, yes.
With the integral concrete color, that's mixed into the concrete directly, right? Okay. Yeah.
Yep, Jacob.
Thank you. This one feels easy to me because I thought we had come to consensus at workshop on it being the dyed concrete. What exact color it is, I can think of colors I don't want it to be, but I'm not sure. The green makes sense to me. It's our city color and our city logo, but I can't get myself to a place of anything other than the dyed concrete, and I think that's what I recall.
The dyed concrete, I think, is a conclusion, not just painted on. And, just looking at the public out there, I don't see an awful lot of smiles on the green as shown, but I think I killed that one. Good. Councilor Tobin, got anything?
The integral, however you say that word, integral concrete.
Yeah. Good, okay. Yep. Okay, so it sounds like it's option one.
Yep.
Oh, yes?
It's all good.
And I'm putting in a request for something more brick-like stamped. How do you guys feel? Yes? No? You don't want it?
Nope.
I don't know about that. You just want to go simple?
Yep.
Okay. I don't really care whether it's stamped or not, but I think the stamp would be minimal cost increase and be a little more aesthetically strong. Okay, moving on.
Thank you. So raised crosswalks. We mentioned before the crosswalk tables that we have at Gilboa and Railroad. We also have three that are one is at the top of the square, at Central Square. One is on the Washington Street approach, and the other is on the Court Street approach. So there's really three ways of treating these.
Side streets.
And the individual side streets. I'm sorry. Thank you, Bob, for incorporating that. We want to make sure that pedestrians are crossing along that curb plane. We're prioritizing pedestrians throughout the quarter. So you can see on option one, this is a concrete option. The concrete includes the ramp up, the actual table surface itself, and then a ramp down. Very similar in configuration with bituminous. It would just be built on the bituminous roadway, but the ramp would be bituminous, and the crosswalk on top of it would maintain that same material. And the third option is unit pavers. And again, from a cost perspective, the bituminous would be more cost-effective than concrete, but concrete would be more cost-effective than the unit pavers. And I know there's a bit of history with unit pavers and how they're built, but because they're segmented block and they're pieces, there would be a little bit more intensive maintenance than say concrete or bituminous. I want to point out in this slide here, this is Main Street crosswalks right now. This top photo, which is a resin-based epoxy infill material that is stenciled. So you're seeing an operation here where the orangish brickish color pattern is the stencil. So this is really, it would be milled out of the the bituminous pavement, it would be placed very similar to what you have today. Our drawings show a standard crosswalk with kind of, we call them a piano key, a ladder type of crosswalk. This is more of a solid infill, which would be, you know, this brick pattern of sorts, or any pattern that the design detail might come up with, but really colored as a solid color. So having that is a question of preference, and when I say the ladder type, on the concrete, that's more of a ladder type crosswalk. This would be a solid infill color. Our thoughts here would be, your main street crosswalks would be built in this fashion. Your side streets could be just the ladder type crosswalks as well. We could focus here initially on material type, and then if you have any questions on the type of crosswalk, striping, we can talk about that as well. You can see that Public Works opted for option 1 and 2, and the director can speak to that, but from the perspective of the mainline streets, that would be concrete on the raised tables. On the side streets, those would be bituminous. Is that fair?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so Ed is correct. We're recommending kind of splitting the baby, or as my predecessor might say, tearing the baby. On the side streets, we're going to recommend asphalt just because our staff are able to maintain them. They're able to fix the asphalt. But for the crosswalk between Gilbo and Railroad Plaza, that raised intersection, and the crosswalks at Central Square, I think it makes sense to have something a little more robust, a little more aesthetically impressive, if you will. So that's where we would suggest the stamped concrete or patterned concrete. I do not recommend the unit pavers. I think everybody here recalls our history with unit paver crosswalks downtown. They were problematic for sure. In terms of the pattern itself, you probably all remember that we've gone through a number of different crosswalk marking methods in the downtown. There was some hexagons. There's the pattern that we have now, just regular painted crosswalks. The system that we have now is really, I think, a nice compromise. It's a little more aesthetically pleasing. It's very attractive, but it can be repaired pretty simply. We can, like for example, just fix the wheel tracks that get rutted out and worn through by the snow tires without having to redo everything. Totally lost my train of thought, sorry. And it's more durable than the pavers that we've had not so great success with.
Okay. So with the staff recommendation, you there, Jake? Yep. Okay. Yes.
I do feel good about that option in terms of the markings and the wide lines like that. Sometimes those do get worn out pretty quickly, and it's hard to tell that there's a crosswalk, so I would want to maybe kind of explore that at some point. But
Okay, moving along. And again, anyone in the audience wants to chime in, just put your hand and, yes, next.
Okay. Thank you. Bike racks, trash and recycling receptacles. These are all site furnishings, and I can talk to bike racks, and then I'll hand it to Bob on the trash and recycling receptacles. We've looked at just a couple of options here, more so fixed in on the U-shaped bike racks. These are similar to what the city has now. The ones on this photo here on the top right for the bike racks, these would be permanently mounted on a concrete pad. You can see they're bolted down. A little bit more flexible would be the locations like this triple U-shaped bike rack could be portable. You can mount it, here and there, and move where, there might be more of you set it somewhere, and, it might be important to move that around and keep moving them around in different locations. There are options, bike racks, with or without a city logo. This just happens to be an example of how they could look. It's another amenity to bring, a little bit of character to the downtown as an option. Trash and recycle.
Sure. So for trash and recycling, there's a number of options. The upper left is essentially what's out there today, different versions of what's out there today. You would have a separate bin for trash and separate for recycling. The one next to that in the upper right, it's kind of a combination. So it's kind of a trash and recycle combo that would sit together. The lower left are a little bit more contemporary versions of separate trash and recycling. And then the lower right are actually, I forget the name of them.
Big bellies.
Big bellies. They're compactors. So they actually are mini compactors, and so it reduces the amount of times you need to empty them. But they are more expensive.
I think in either case, though, the important thing was to try to split trash and recycling and have multiple fixtures there to encourage that. So the decision matrix really here is on bike racks was to look at that option 1, a U rack, either movable or permanent, or the option 2, same U rack but with customized signage. That could be an enhancement. And then on trash and recycle, there were 3 options. The first one was similar to we call it the treetop products. That is what you guys have today. The other was a little bit more modern looking, again, but they're still separate. And then obviously the number 3 is the big bellies. So you can see the Public Works preferences on those.
I like the signage, and I'd like to look into whether that couldn't be a fundraiser. Essentially, different businesses or the Kiwanis, Rotary, whatnot, actually buy the bike rack and then get the city logo on there with gift of, but that would need to get priced out, and I don't think that's an urgent decision now, but Jacob. Okay.
And it kind of piggybacks with what you said. Looking at the photos, it looks like it's just a bar with the stamps. So I'm looking at that bottom one a little bit. So that can be added later on, at a later date, possibly?
Yeah,
Welded
based on the rack, it could be, that could be added at really at any time. If that, you could see this sidebar right here, or what we would suggest that if you're going to do that, maybe you buy your end unit, wherever that end one is, with that sidebar, in case you want to convert that at some other time. That's not really a large cost. Even the signage, I don't think is a budget buster certainly by any means, but I think the option for donations or sponsorship is a nice idea.
Okay, so first decision is dealing with, is it permanently fixed or movable? What are you saying?
Thank you. I had to associate myself with the previous 2 comments. I know we're trying to move through this quickly. The decision, as far as movable or permanent, I am thinking movable probably makes the most sense. I just am.
Counselor?
No.
What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with the movable options.
The movable makes more sense because if you have temporary ones and you find they're not being used at that particular location, and you could easily move them. Plus, if you have to have maintenance around them, it's easier to move them. So it makes more sense to have the portable bike racks.
Councilor Tobin?
I'd prefer the permanent, just because sometimes the ones that are movable end up getting sort of tossed in a corner, twisted, they're not positioned clearly, but I don't have a strong preference.
Well, okay.
I will have another quick question about the trash cans, though.
Okay, yeah, when we get there. I'm more favorable to the movable also, so.
I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that we might be able to kind of reach a compromise. Some of the locations where we know are going to stay where they are and they're not in the way for, say, winter maintenance of sidewalks and whatnot, we might want to have them be permanently installed, but a lot of them would be movable, so we can move them for maintenance and whatnot.
You also could permanently attach the movable. Boom. Okay. Any other decisions on the bike racks that we need to do at this time?
That's it?
Okay, moving on to the trash cans. Oh,
On the bike racks, just a question. Bike racks that look like the hoop have a space for a bike on either side. I'm kind of surprised that there isn't something that is more continuous with more lanes, like where you slide your bike into that lane, and they are continuous like that. And I believe that, as I've seen those in other cities that are really heavy bike uses, I've seen that design more often. Anyway, I'm surprised that one's not presented for your consideration.
I think what you're referring to is like the bikes that you can rent in big cities.
Yeah, they're slotted, right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Counselor Haas, who's the resident bicycle person.
Ed Haas, and speaking sort of for a bicycle pedestrian committee. We had done a study of bike racks and the different range and types that could be available and the different models, different arrangements. Did that reach Stantec for your review, for inclusion and comparison? And these staple types are good, but there is a wide other variety, and perhaps if you hadn't seen that recommendation, we should hold off on this item and then get that to you.
Yeah, we did not see that recommendation or that report, but that would be great to share, yeah. I think that would be nice.
Okay.
Leave
Any
it to
objection to
committee.
holding off on this decision?
No, it's not going to delay anything.
No, what the heck. Moving on.
We can work on the sponsorship side at the same time then.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about the trash cans, folks? What do you think? Yep.
Just real, well, Counselor Tobin, I think, had wanted, had already mentioned.
Oh, okay, I don't care. Go ahead.
Thanks. Two quick things, I guess. First of all, compost, is that a consideration? And I say that because I noticed that a lot of downtown businesses have shifted to compostable trash. So compostable plastic and things like that. And I'm wondering if there's, whether now or in the future, an option for that that will match one of these styles.
I don't know what that would be. And I just see the trash downtown and the folks that fill the trash bins downtown. And I don't think we have trash there long enough to compost, but.
Yeah, and I think that the answer is if that became a thing, it would probably be a third bin next to the waste and the recycling. I should also say that the recommendation here from Public Works for the big bellies is purely a utilitarian recommendation. The compactors allow us to empty those bins once a week. The standard size trash cans, we have to empty them 2 or 3 times a week.
Would you be considering the standard trash cans as well as the compactors?
Well, that's what we're
Like what
asking you
have
to
now.
consider.
Yeah. Hmm?
That's what we're looking for you to consider.
But to have them both,
Yeah, we would suggest one or the other.
one or the other?
Yeah, right now, I think we have the compactors in 2 locations.
So you want to have consistency all the same?
Right.
Ooh. Yes.
Yeah, I think the part that because that argument is compelling to me around the efficiency of staff. I think what I'm struggling with is that those don't look very historic downtown to me.
Nope.
So I'm leaning more towards option 1, could live with option 2. I'm really struggling with. It's like a weird thing to like get caught up over with trash cans, but it's not. It's a little bit modern for my taste for the feel of our downtown.
100%.
Yes.
I'm leaning towards option 3 only because a couple of things. I'm thinking as far as durability, as far as like getting tipped over, that type of thing. And then as far as pests and animals getting into the trash, it just seems to be more able to contain the trash more, even out of line of sight. So I'm leaning towards 3.
Can you fill us in on the cost difference between probably 1 and 3?
Yeah, option one and 2 are comparable. I'd call that, if I'm gonna just classify it with $1 sign. I would say that option 3 is $3.50 signs from a comparison. They are a little bit more expensive, it's, you have history in buying them if you want to share that, but yeah, it would be more expensive.
Manager?
I just wanted to add one other thing to think about. For the option 1 type receptacles, we don't get great recycling compliance. We get better compliance with the option 3 for whatever reason.
Does option 3 require wiring, or is it solar?
They're solar powered.
And obviously, option 1 is not going to break down.
That's true.
Something mechanical. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with option 1. One, cost, obviously. And it's one of those, keep it simple, stupid. You see trash cans, and if, the big bellies that come with a big cost, and they also come with maintenance repairs, where your basic trash can doesn't. And for the price difference, it'd be 3 times more. We could go out and get more of option 1s. We could put more trash cans downtown, especially in the event of, downtown projects that are going on. So I think, once again, this is one of these cases that we have to be really careful about we have to remember who's paying for these. And option 1, they work, and they're a third the less cost. So I'm with option 1.
I didn't hear anyone say anything good about option 2, so I think we can take that out of the discussion. Okay. We have a 1. We have a,
I'm a 3 and then a 1. I'm okay with 1 as well, but I'd prefer 3.
I'm okay with 1.
and I'm a 1. There we go.
Good.
Boom.
Next item.
And
Okay.
my request again, if we can get the logo on the side of that.
There's an option for a small logo on that as well, so that's something that we can
Later,
detail
yeah.
and look at for you. Sure.
Later. Next slide.
Okay.
Oh, here's a real controversial one.
Hydrants. I tell you, we would get into a little bit of the weeds. So these are, I know that there's 4 options here, but I think there's really 2, because there's a painting scheme that's one. But on option 1, 2, and 3, it's a new modern hydrant. It's just a replica of older hydrants. So if that was an important item, and we did talk to the Heritage Commission, about this. They did like the old, call it a throwback hydrant. Option 4 is essentially the existing hydrants here. And you can see really there's really 4 different painting schemes. There could be more, but option 1 is just solid red. Option 2 is a red body with the different valves and the valve cover or the bonnet is white. Option 3 is something nearby, which is all yellow, and option 4 is your standard hydrant type. With a blue colored bonnet, and Public Works can explain the blue color represents the line pressure that would be delivering the water. So it's really an indicator to the fire department when it shows up that blue is your extra high pressure system, and if it's low pressure system, then they would be treating it a little bit differently. So those are the differences.
You want to add anything?
Yeah, so I think this one might be one that me and Councilor Filio agree on. My recommendation is to stick with our standard hydrants. If the preference is to make them blend more, we could paint the bodies black instead of the silver gray color that you see on our hydrants. But the bonnet should be color-coded to the available fire flow for the fire department to know what's available there.
They used to be black.
They used to be black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any preferences?
No, I agree, and I knew the color, it has to do with fire pressures, that's why there's different color hydrants through the city.
That's right.
Determines the fire pressure, but,
Yep.
if you have, like, show me all 4 options, I have a new puppy, and he'd be glad to try them out. So we'll see which color is more dog effective.
Okay, so, looks like it's 4.
Thank you.
And that also makes us standard parts for repairs and whatnot.
Which is why we really want to stick with the standard hydrants. It's not another system that we have to stock parts for.
We could reuse the old ones.
We do.
Good. Okay, planters.
So, if you remember on the proposed plan, basically, a lot of the tree planting north of Railroad and Gilbo on the northern end of Main Street and at the perimeter of Central Square, we're proposing planters for the proposed trees, for the new trees. And for planter materials, we're looking at a couple of different options. So the image on the left, excuse me, is what's out there today on Main Street. So option 1 would be a vertical granite curb. It'd be a 6-inch reveal. And this wouldn't be just street curb. This would be a finished granite. It would have a thermal finish on the top, or all exposed faces would have a thermal finish. And we call it a dimensional granite. It's just a more finished and finer looking detail than a street curb or other materials. So then if you also remember, on option 2, we also have in a number of locations these granite benches at the ends of the planters. And what we're also suggesting is the opportunity to include a short fence that would be mounted on the top of the curb. It gives it a more finished look. It also prevents people from cutting through, prevents pets from going into the planter areas, and it's just a nicer looking detail. And that can be either on the 2 sides, or it could be 3-sided, as you see on the bottom.
Committee?
Okay. And so Public Works is their preference would be option 2.
I don't know that I have a strong preference. I would maybe be interested in what exactly the railing would look like. That one to me looks, again, that has a fairly modern feel to it in a way that I'm not sure would blend with the rest of downtown, but I don't know that I'm married to either one of these. I'm more interested in what's like in the planters. So.
And again, the recommendation is really more utilitarian. The beds tend to get a little shabby looking if people are cutting through them, if dogs are using them inappropriately, like Councilor Filio's puppy. So, our recommendation to have that fencing is really just to keep those beds looking a little bit better, a little less trafficked. To that end, I think we could find like a wrought iron fence detail that would be appropriate for the downtown.
Yeah, that was a good add to it. The fence is mounted into the granite.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. Yep.
Cost efficiency, what are we talking?
The fence is obviously more than.
How much more?
If I'm gonna use the same analogy again, maybe $1.50 bills. I don't see it as depending on how ornamental you want to get, but there are some more historic looking versus modern looking. But if it's wrought iron or if it's aluminum, it's going to vary in costs. Do you have an opinion?
No, I think you're about right. And just remember too, that it's only for the north end of Main Street and some of the planters around the perimeter of Central Square. It's not the whole corridor.
Yeah, I think wrought iron. Vicki, please.
Morgan, 275 Water Street. I guess this question is for the city attorney. So what's the liability issues of tripping hazards?
We do have immunity protections for a lot of these things. We have what's called discretionary function immunity for how we do designs from traffic to pedestrian traffic like this. So I I don't know that that needs to be a factor with this choice.
Okay. Chuck?
Chuck Redfern, 9 Colby Street. I'm thinking more of a safety hazard with those fences. If somebody's going to brush up against them, fall, wheelchair goes by, gets stuck up in them somehow. You know, it can get busy on the sidewalk, particularly when we're adding bike lanes to it. So I wouldn't worry so much if we have insurance to cover the injured. I'd be more concerned with prevention. That's just my 2 cents. I could be wrong, but I do like the lower profile of the others because I think it's less likely for somebody to stumble over. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
Thanks.
Again, these are raised as opposed to the existing condition, which is semi-raised.
The existing is raised as well, correct?
Yeah, but that's very small, right? Or is it?
It's similar.
It would be about the same?
It'd be about the same, yep.
Oh. Okay.
And my concern would be skateboards. So anything that raises up that skateboard could jump to or use in any manner, it will be used.
So, when, just
fence would help with that.
To clarify, would that be better or worse to have the?
In my opinion, it's worse. It chips.
They're going to ride along the fence?
Not the fence, but those at the end, those concrete pieces that are shown at the end there, it invites somebody to try it. Just look at the county steps, look at Keene State College steps. It's what happens. Personally, I think what we have downtown has worked pretty well, amazingly. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with option one. Once again, this is one of these, I think it's just keep it simple. I don't think we need to overcomplicate. And as far as people tripping, let's face it, that can happen at any street downtown at any time, so we can't prevent everything. But I think, cost-wise and efficiency-wise, and I think the mayor makes a good point, I see those rails as something that's just going to be broken down the road. So keep it simple, keep it concrete.
All right. Jacob?
1.
Kat?
1.
Laura?
I'm broken, but I'm okay with 1, and that makes sense.
And you're,
1.
And you're 1, and I'm 1. What it is.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Save some money. Okay, tree wells and.
Tree wells.
Tree wells, excuse me. So as we just were discussing, generally north of Railroad and Gilbo, the street trees are in planters. But because of the reduced sidewalk width as you get to Railroad and Gilbo South on Main Street, the trees are flush with grade. And currently what's out there on those conditions are, you do have some tree grates in various locations, as you can see on the left, but then also there's just a mulch or planting bed in a lot of locations. One of the main issues with tree health, street tree health and urban environments is compaction. So the existing condition on the right, where you just have a mulch bed that's very susceptible to compaction, and that's very bad for the tree roots and the tree health and the growth of the tree. So we would recommend some kind of a treatment over that that's not just an open tree pit. So option one would be a tree grate, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah.
Option one would be an actual tree grate like what's there now. One thing to mention too is in these conditions where we have a flush condition, we are proposing we've talked about this previously, the Silva Cell system, which is it's a structural, almost like a milk crate system that's below grade that accommodates additional root volume growth, soil volume for root growth, as well as supports the pavement above it. And so the tree grate would be integrated into that system. Similarly, what we're calling option one in the upper right, which is, I guess, is really option two, right? I don't know how we have it on the chart.
We are showing, you'll see that when we get to the decision matrix.
So the other two options would be what's called a paver grate. So it's, and actually it's a tree grate, but it's below the level of the pavers, and you would actually put permeable pavers on top of that. So there'd be a structural grate that would support pavers. It allows for drainage to percolate through, and it's a little bit nicer detail than just a regular tree grate. And then the last option would be a new system that we've been using quite a bit. It's called a porous resin-bound paving. If you've seen poured-in-place playground surfacing, it's a very similar product. It's a little bit more dense, but it's basically a plastic that's bound together with resin. It's a little bit flexible and it's porous. So that's another system that's been used. I believe Public Works is recommending the tree grates, which was matching existing.
Let's start with Laura. Mix it up.
So quick question, I guess, are there going to be other things planted with the trees, or is these are just separate from?
Where the trees are flush, no.
Okay, either way, even with the existing mulch.
So the previous discussion about the planting beds was
Right.
further north on Main Street where we've got areas with trees planted intermixed with perennials and shrubs and whatnot. This is more for those instances where trees are planted by themselves.
Okay. I'm good with the existing tree grates, or the option one.
Or the tree grate, yeah.
No.
Which
that was-
matches existing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one
Yes.
they recommended.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm
Thank
fine
you.
with that also, that's good.
Cat. Okay,
Yeah.
look, tree grates.
The way it is.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll move on to some further site furnishings, which is ornamental traffic signal bases. So part of our conversation, again, with the Heritage Commission, we are looking at traffic signals, as you've seen before, that are essentially modernized, and we need mast arms to cover the lanes as is required. So looking at, and this is just an example, I believe this is from Dedham, of where they have their lighting fixtures and their traffic signal posts kind of match one another. So there's two signal post bases that we did a little bit of research that really look similar. More so this option one, which is this it's called a Washington base. This is very similar to your lighting fixtures now, but this traffic signal base, although it would be bulkier, much larger than your street lights, that base would be very similar. And then there's more of a different type that would fit in, but with a slightly different focus. And this one's called a Raleigh. So if this didn't have a base cover similar to this, your traffic signals would look like they do now, which is a steel post that terminates at a concrete base that's really straight, as I said, as exists today. So we're looking for some feedback on either option one, the Washington base, or option two. We did ask Public Works why they didn't have an opinion. They were neutral on it, so it's really at your preference that we'd ask.
What we have now would be the option one, right?
Your
We're not talking about the poles, this is just the base.
Your bases, and you can see here, this little piece right here is the difference between is a straight pole and a fluted pole, the ones that have the little indentations. Your street lighting systems now, not your traffic signals, but your street lighting systems are very similar to this Washington base, and the posts are actually fluted. So, and that's what's been selected already in our previous action. So yeah, this Washington base with the fluted post would fit closest to what your street lighting is.
That's my choice.
See, Public Works didn't have an option either way. What's the cost difference between the two?
There's really not a nominal cost difference between these two options right here.
Okay, thank you.
And for us, there's no maintenance durability difference. It's purely aesthetics.
Okay.
Laura?
I would definitely vote one.
Yep.
One?
I
One.
prefer two, but I don't care.
Okay,
As long as the traffic lights work.
yeah, okay.
That's
Option
the
one,
exciting part.
with fluted poles.
With fluted poles, that is
Yeah.
correct. And just as an example here on lighting, this is, we're looking at, and we included this is that very similar base that we just talked about, fluted post. This is your street light fixtures today that will be matched. That decision was made. In addition to the site furnishings are these electrical pedestals. These are power posts that provide downtown power. This would be a singular, option one would be a singular receptacle, option two is a dual or more receptacles. We think that that's important. This just happens to be an example of not only standard receptacles, but a BC, a USB and a USB-C connection in here. That's probably not that important in terms of downtown practicality, but I think the size of the pedestal would be, more sleek, more narrow. This would double the size and how it would look. So, but has more function, which may be something that's would be interested in. The other is bollard lights. So we have bollard lighting. Just to add for better visibility at the large crosswalk here that's raised, so where we raise the crosswalks and have a big open gap, not only up here, but down at Railroad Square and at Gilbo, the entrance to Gilbo. We need safety bollards to prevent vehicles from accessing folks right there. So in the 360 visualization that we did, you'll recall this was really a standardized lighted bollard. We did get feedback from the Heritage Commission that said if we could find something that would have more of a kind of a historic base looking, that would somewhat match the lights. We haven't found one that would match the lighting fixture base particularly, but there's three options of bollards that we'd ask you to consider as well. So they all look a little bit different.
Well, starting off with the the receptacles, I would rather see two receptacles than extension cords and splitters and like what goes on during the events. I'm not interested in the USB. That doesn't really fit with downtown festivals.
Yep. Okay.
Yep, two. Okay, bollard lights. Two.
Yeah. Same.
What, two or three?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
Two?
I can be okay with two.
Yeah.
What?
I think 3 would match with our light post a little bit better. Didn't we say we had ridged signal lights right now, too? So I feel like 3 would match better aesthetically, but.
The whole center. On 3, the whole center section is illuminated, not the top.
Okay.
So it's almost like the whole center section is the lens.
Elongated lantern of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus kind of a post top light.
I'm with option 2.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
I have a question.
Yep.
Well, while we're on the subject of bollards, I have it in my notes here that brought up, I don't think it's part of your display here tonight, but since we're on the subject, we had talked about this in MSFI as we were talking about the downtown project, as far as when we have downtown events, having temporarily removed bollards that we can put in, say at Washington and Court and some of the streets coming in, and I was reading where many communities use them, including Buffalo, New York, so I don't want to hear we can't use them in snow. They're portable for events. You screw them into the ground. When the event's over, you take them off and put them back in the pickup and bring them back down to Public Works. And the reason that I would prefer this type of method is right now, when we have downtown events, we use multi-million-dollar trucks as blockades, million-dollar fire trucks. You use half of Public Works equipment. Not only is that, cost inefficient, bringing all those trucks downtown, which I know Public Works charges for those, so I'm sorry, I'm going to probably hit your budget a little bit. But we also, lately we've had ambulances, we use fire trucks, to block off the streets. And it takes the manpower to get all these trucks downtown. I think it'd be much more cost efficient if we could get a price on removable bollards. And then we have downtown events, a couple of guys go out in pickups, screw them in on a Friday night or Saturday morning, then Sunday or whenever the event's over, you take them back. So it's probably not something you have for us tonight, but I would like to look into that and see if that'd be cost efficient, because I think it has to be way more efficient than what we're doing now.
Yeah, and you're right, we don't have that ready for you tonight. We did hear that request, and we are evaluating different options.
Okay.
I haven't found the one that I loved yet, but we know that that's something that you're interested in. And as far as like hitting the budget, I just want to set the record clear. We charge event organizers whatever it costs us to have folks come in and move the equipment and whatnot. We don't make any money off of that.
As a previous Public Works Director, so I'm not going to throw it on you.
It won't break my heart at all to not have as much effort to staff those events.
Okay, out of the rabbit hole and on to the next decision.
Yep.
Yes.
Was the bollard selected, was it option 2? Is that what
Oh,
you
for the lighted ones? Yeah, okay, two.
I just wanted to make sure I had that. Perfect. Okay, great. Well, you've finished the Main Street list here, which is great, and the other lists get shorter, so let's continue on as quickly as we can. So, but you did great work here. So Gilbo Ave and Railroad Street. Now, you'll see in the layout, the sidewalk components are here, bike racks, we're not gonna repeat all of those items all over again, but what is unique to the Gilbo Avenue area are 2 features that we want to make sure that we understand, which is the canopy lighting. So this catenary lighting that is along, and let me go back to the plan. If you recall in the design, it was important to activate and light up this area right in here between the buildings along the Cheshire Rail Trail. So that catenary lighting is shown, in 2 different styles of lighting fixtures that we found that would be appropriate and maintainable. These are shown connected to buildings, and that would be subject to ongoing conversations with the building owners, but we thought we'd like to get your opinion on a style of the lighting fixture. One, they're both really generally industrial looking, would match fairly well with what the theme is, which is an old rail corridor right through here. So you can look at option 1, this type of canopy light, or option 2, this type of canopy light. Other unique item for the area, which, let me go back to the plan. These leaning benches would be in and around the larger gathering space, and those leaning benches just really either, allows somebody to do some work while standing. They're not necessarily energized, but sometimes they are energized with receptacles, and it's an option that you can look at. An option 2, which is really kind of an angled leaning bench, a true leaning bench. Just allows people to either put a bag down while they're waiting or meeting people. So these are just 2 options of use of that space anywhere possible. So we'll ask you to consider the catenary light type and the leaning rail type.
Back to the
And
picture.
Public Works has made their opinions known here.
Back to the picture, please. And by the way, if any of you want to stand up and stretch or whatnot, it's not being rude. And if you want to walk around. Looking at the picture, I thought that was just bare bulbs.
Say that again?
The photograph.
The picture is.
What's wrong with that? Just
Oh.
bulbs.
I'm missing what you said, I'm sorry.
No, the example photo is just bulbs. It doesn't have the fixture.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't have the fixture, yeah. We were just trying
to show the character.
Get the character of the dimensional
I
character.
don't want to be a troublemaker, but I think the bare bulbs look good too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think when I first saw this, I'd like to see it on Church Street, Lamson Street.
Yeah.
Basically the alleys.
Yep.
It'd be interesting, yeah.
Just saying the same thing that I'm going to say. I like the bare bulb. It's just kind of a rustic look. But it's more so than just look. A lot of these alleyways are very dark at night. And I think, especially in the downtown area, people feel a lot safer I know at night when the Colonial Theater lets out and you put 800 people downtown, some of these alleyways are pretty dark, and I think people feel a lot more secure. And Councilor Greenwald is correct. I think this is good for Gilbo, and I think down the road, maybe we ought to just take a look, and don't spend the money now, please. Look at some of the other alleyways that are dark at night where this might be efficient for lighting.
Yeah, and I will say, Mr. Chair, that the recommendation for the option 2 is really based on the degree of protection for that bulb, right? So the bare bulb has no protection around the bulb at all, where the first option offers protection a little bit, and the third one adds a little bit more with the cage underneath. That's really my only preference. In terms of aesthetics, I think they all look nice, but having a little bit of protection around that bulb would be helpful.
Just thinking of the cost of fixtures, but I also have to shift my head. This is not my property, and, this is a multi-million-dollar project. I'm not talking about a string of Christmas lights here.
Can they be, sorry.
What? Yeah.
Can they be added later on if we went with the bare bulb? Can the canopies be added?
This is one of those areas where the gentleman mentioned before about alternate ads. This might be one of those things that you want pricing on. But yeah, if you looked at if your question was, if we went with bare bulbs and then can we fit on the canopy to it later, I would say that.
No, you'd have to replace the whole system.
The whole system, yeah. But the add alternate, I think, is a good idea.
A number of these items would work well.
Yeah, Counselor.
Yeah, I also don't hate the idea of just the bare bulbs, and I understand the degree of protection piece. But I'm also thinking that, any way that we can, I guess what I would describe essential pieces of this, if we can be controlling the costs and keeping things simple, then I'm happy with that, and this seems to fall into that category for me.
And just to say it anyway, we don't have to have it at all. But I think it's a spectacular add to the project for not an awful lot of expense.
I agree.
Anything, Laura?
I'll just add that, so I do like the bare bulbs. If I were going to pick one of these options, I would pick the second one because there is a drinking fountain that was modeled after an old fire call tower it's been in Central Square, and that's what that reminds me of.
That's true.
Your Honor? Yes?
Yeah. First off, I would encourage that we limit the ad alternates. It does drive bidders kind of crazy if there are too many. Second, that this is a good one for an ad alternate because you could ask for unit pricing. And I think this, given your desire to see this go down multiple alleyways, unit pricing would be a good ad alternate.
Okay, so we can leave this item that way? Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is one item I have to support my Public Works brother. 3 in the morning, coming out of bars, and anything lit is a fair shot, and once one light goes, another light smashed. Public Works isn't going to replace these lights every time one goes out. It's going to be a while. Several lights go out, you're going to get complaints because the lights are out. So I say protect, protect, protect. And also with those bollards, those lit bollards, they are a great opportunity for a bat or someone to kick down. So look at the future maintenance, and I know Public Works always looks at future maintenance and make things rugged to last. And those guards will make things last and prevent the vandalism that can happen.
If we're doing one of the fixtures, there would be much fewer fixtures than there are bulbs shown, correct, or not?
That's right, and I think the other big difference too is that the fixtures in option 1 and 2, they're cable supported. So the cable actually gets supported at the building faces or on poles. And then that lights and the supporting electrical hangs off of that, where the lights, the ones that are just the bulbs, is just a string that is not cable supported.
So is it like 3 fixtures across and then, and I'm just trying to,
No, you'd see, I think you'd see
Visualize.
more of a frequency than 3. I think you're seeing a strand here that's probably separated by, I'm gonna guess maybe 15 inches, a little over, maybe a little over 12 on center or so. So you might not have, the 10 bulbs that you have here, but certainly would have 7 or 8. I think you'd have a fairly decent span across to get the lighting effect that you want. Is that fair?
Yep.
Yeah.
okay.
If it's between the option 1 and 2 here, then I like option 2 for the protection piece. And the cage does, again, feel a little bit less modern, I guess, than the top one. I still don't hate the idea of just the bare bulbs. And I'm also not sure that this is necessarily, I appreciate the comment about the safety of them and the vandalism. I don't know that this particular area is an area where I'm necessarily concerned about that, in comparison to some other areas that are coming to mind for where these might go in the future. So if it's between option 1 and 2, I'm with option 2, but I'm fine with the bare bulbs as well.
Okay.
Same.
I'm looking at the bare bulbs like it's going to last 3 to 5 years. No, it's just not going to be a permanent arrangement. So I'm tipped to option 2.
I'm going with the bare bulbs and buy an extra case of bulbs.
Laura?
I'll go 2.
Okay, what's the score?
I'm not sure.
Add alternate for number 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Good, good. And the leaning rail, yeah.
My initial thought was, and I would like to hear some discussion about this because my initial thought was, is this one of those things that we really need as part of this project? So.
Let me just note that, so we had proposed these leaning rails both in this Gilboa area, but also in Railroad Square, which we'll look at next. It's just a feature, a site feature that we've been using in a lot of our urban projects, and they're just very popular and well-used. It's kind of a newer type of product, newer type of feature that tends to get a lot of use, and that's why we were proposing it, to kind of activate and give some different uses for the different public spaces.
I've never seen it anywhere, but obviously you have. It would probably answer the question of people hanging out on the bench all day, because that's not very comfortable to sit all day. So I could lose it. Oh, Laura, okay. No.
Thank you. I really like actually option 1. I can picture myself using that and just kind of gathering around and talking to people around that. It may sound kind of strange, but I can imagine that being a little gathering place, having a drink or something like that, coffee, ice cream, whatever. I can picture one.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't support the leaning rail. I mean, when our constituents talk to us, they say, get the project done, we know it has to get done, but don't waste our money. This is wasting the money, so this is a big no for me.
Yes, sir.
it seems like a great conversation point, like one of the counselors mentioned. Maybe this is something that gets put out to the general public of, hey, we're going to fundraise to have these things put in. I don't think it's something that should be outright dismissed. You want people to congregate in downtown. Correct me if I'm wrong. So this is a great congregation point. And benches, leaning posts, whatever it is, there needs to be some type of way for people to stop and rest and talk.
Okay. I'm reading the bobbing heads out there also. All right, Kat, yeah.
I wouldn't want to eliminate any seating on Gilbo. So like, if we weren't going to do any leaning rail, I still would want some benches periodically.
Benches are coming up.
Okay, all right. But yes, I would be okay with tabling the leaning rails for now and seeing where we are down the future. I feel like those can be added at any time.
So careful with the word tabling. You mean pass on the,
Right.
not include them at this time?
Put it on the back burner.
Yeah, no, you're a yes. As you
Yeah, I'll
already said.
vote one, even if
What?
I'm not, I said I would vote one, but that's.
And you're a none, I'm a none. So it could always be added in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we did get catenary lights, okay, thanks. So we're on to Railroad Square. Again, not repeating any items that we've already talked about, but there are a couple of things that we'll focus on right now is the paving areas. And we've talked about sidewalks, we've talked about unit pavers, so we're gonna talk a little bit about what can happen here. There's archways that we want to talk about, and the little shade structure that is in here as well. So, and some benches that will be coming up as well. So let's talk about the standard concrete options or the surface options. Go ahead, Bob.
Similar to what we talked about on Main Street, we kind of have the same kind of palette of choices. I think the only difference is that, at least I don't want to put words in Public Works mouth, but I think they're a little bit more supportive of unit paving as an accent element in Railroad Square. So certainly the first option would be a standard concrete broom finish or exposed aggregate. Second option would be a combination of standard concrete and stamped concrete combination. But then the third option would be introducing unit pavers as an accent in specific areas to kind of designate different zones within the square. Do we have a decision on that?
We'll get to that. I think we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
We'll
So-
continue through, yeah.
So back to the plan, one of the features that we were proposing that seems to have some momentum and some buy-in from the community is the idea of representing the historic railroad in the pavement. And so we have some different options about how that could get represented. The first option would be to actually use real rails, to get surplus rails from either the state or from another source and actually incorporate that into the paving. The paving would come up flush with the top of it, but it would represent real rails that represent the historic situation in that area. The second option would be to use a Corten steel, which is a steel that rusts naturally, and it would just be a steel plate. So it'd be the thickness of a rail if you were looking at it from the top, but it wouldn't be the full depth. It would just be the thick, a half-inch or a three-quarter-inch plate that would represent the rails. The third option is more of an interpretive idea where the rail could be represented in the paving, and you could potentially have some interpretive elements associated with that. And then the fourth option is actually using pavers. Have a paving pattern that represented kind of conceptually a rail that went through the zone. Do we have decisions after that?
We do. So again, the plaza paving was one item we just talked about, and then the railroad tracks themselves as a second item.
So Public Works is supporting some combination of option 1 and 3, the standard concrete with unit pavers in the plaza, and then also the Corten or steel strip option for, which was option 2.
What was the problem with option 2?
So I'm just suggesting that this is an area where selective use of those unit pavers could be used to really make that space distinctive, right? It'll be a different feeling. It'll be a little more polished space. I definitely don't want to have the unit pavers throughout the downtown for maintainability perspective. But I think, using them selectively here or in the middle of Central Square can really highlight the significance of those spaces.
Who's up? What do you think?
I'll speak. As far as pavers goes, never use them in high traffic areas. And and Railroad Square has been pavers, and especially in the winter with the frost and the water, and those pavers come up, go down, and in the past those pavers have been a nightmare at Railroad Square. And then when they freeze and thaw, then you get puddles. Then the puddles become an ice skating rink. So, really cautious with pavers. They look good, but a couple of winters, and historically they haven't held up very well.
And there's different ways of building them with different bases that we can use to make them more durable. They do take more maintenance. There's no question, which is why I'm not advocating for them, throughout. But they're also very attractive, and they could make those spaces look very nice.
One of the counselors had said that was something that would be missed in that area, the bricks there. So I would like to see a way to incorporate something like that.
Okay. Jake?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to where I started, which is saying which option I want to eliminate. I really do not like the unit pavers for the reasons that I said at the beginning, and Councilor Feely just reiterated. I understand this is a more limited use. I understand there's more things we can do. I see them as a trip hazard. I see them as a maintenance challenge, and so I don't love the use of them there. I'm happier with the use of them in a more limited, isolated, thoughtful way, but I'm thinking about the experiences on Railroad Square right now, and to Councilor Felio's point, I don't love them, so I would prefer whatever we decide. It needs to be concrete forward and minimal, if any, use of pavers.
I like option 1. The concrete,
But
no unit pavers.
Okay.
Standard concrete.
I like option 2. I know none of you said that one, but I don't want to see that as the vast expanse of concrete. And by having a mix of stamped and standard, then we can get the aesthetics of the unit paver and still get some variety out there.
Right. Well, I agree with Councilor Greenwald. It can't be just a barren, concrete. But the pavers I disagree with. But if some colored stamped concrete just for visual would be good. So I'd go with option 2.
Yep. No.
I could go with 2 as well. Yeah.
They'll work some pavers in there anyway. No, I appreciate what you're saying. You could live with 2?
I could live with 2, but I'm voting for 3 because,
Okay. You stand your ground, that's good. It sounds like the vote is option 2, though. Let us not get too tired and punchy as we're going through this, because these are important decisions.
Right.
So, again, if you want to stand, walk, and use the restroom, that's cool. On the railroad tracks, my thought is I want to get real rail.
I mean, that's my thought as well. I was really happy to not see the first thing that was presented, that was the painting of the things. They like all these options better than that, I think. My question is the cost. I know that we had talked about trying to, at some point there was conversation about trying to get the actual historical rail from the rail yard, and now the state surplus. I mean, what are we looking at in terms of cost there? Even though this is an area actually where, to Councilor Tobin's point about the historic nature of this, I feel the sense from the community that this is something we want to preserve the historical nature of. So I'm not saying the cost is a go or no-go situation, but I do want to know.
I think from the cost perspective of trying to find used surplus rail, actual steel rail, it could be very nominal. I mean, it could be donated. I think if it, you know, working with our partners from, say, DOT Railroad, they may have enough surplus material that they could donate to the cause. So that might be, you know, really cost neutral. The Core 10, which is option 2, which is that weathering steel, that would have some cost to it. But if we're embedding it in concrete and stamping concrete around that, I would say from a square foot standpoint, it might be a nominal cost as well. I don't see that as a prohibitive. When you're looking at options 3 and 4, options 3 and 4 can still be accomplished with stamping, just with different coloration and different material type. You'd have that ability to do that. So, yeah, I'd say that these are probably, if you're looking at option 2, which is concrete and concrete stamping, they're probably comparable with, you know, maybe a slight upcharge on the steel side, but.
Thank you.
I agree that I like the real rail option. And if you've got friends with surplus, what else do they have? I mean, you could save us some money here, you know? They rail, what else, you know, lights, poles?
Careful about that, yeah.
Fire hydrants.
Fire hydrants, I mean, you know, call your friends.
Benches. I would refer you to the Cauley Powell Heritage Commission memo that you've got in your packet. The rails were a suggestion of that group, and I think that would be a good follow-through.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Cool.
So one quick concern I have, the ridges, it looks in that picture like there's a groove. Would it be a finished, how would that, I'm wondering about like a wheelchair going through there and if that could get caught in there. Is that,
Yeah, the rails that we would have a solid top.
okay.
It wouldn't have the groove in it.
So,
the groove would be filled with
Okay.
stone dust.
Or filled.
And then I would just be, what was?
yes, so, Mr. Chair, my initial recommendation for the Core 10 steel was really based on the concern that I had with detailing the interface between brick pavers and the rail. My friends at Stantec have assured me that they can make that work, but more to the point, if the preference is going to be for the use of concrete and stamped concrete, using that with steel rail will be very simple. So I think that that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Next item.
Okay, great, thank you. Gateway arches. So there's a number of options in here, and maybe Bob and I can bounce around a little bit, but the two images on the lower right are just precedent images of what's nearby in this community. Keene State College has, you know, these large brick and granite pillars, very stately, with an archway of steel frame and steel text letters. Ashwellet River Park is very similar. Big, large granite posts with a standing arch, again, steel. So we started to look at different options here. Option 1, which is a single post with a brick base. And interestingly enough, when we had the conversation with the Heritage Commission, what was really important was the notion of actually recycling the bricks that are in Railroad Square now for these bases, and whether or not they would be this size or something broader, like what's at Keene State College could be an option. So I think there's a number of options here, but I think pinning down one of these options would be helpful to us, and there's, as I said, there's a number of variations. So option 1 is a single post with brick base. Option 2 is a double post with a brick base. So again, brick base, 2 posts, so they look a little bit different. And again, the steel arch here has actually steel raised letters. This has cut letters into a steel panel or a metal panel. And it could be even different if you preferred having the steel frame with metal letters that are independent. The third option here is really just with a granite post. So I think the reason why this one kind of came to the bottom of 1A was really what was informed by utilizing the brick to the best extent possible, and this really was a good option. And we focused on the gateway arch at Railroad Square, but there's also space for one at, the archway into the Gilbo and the Cheshire Rail Trail, if you were so inclined to consider that as well. Do you want to add anything to that, Bob?
No, I was just going to add the comment that we had from staff yesterday about the letters, but you mentioned that.
Yeah. So there, again, the Public Works Department was all on board with multiple options here, but what was most important was the brick base.
You make it sound like I'm indecisive, Ed. Yeah, really the preference here is based on the comments from the Heritage Commission. I actually learned that through this process that the pavers in Railroad Square were donated back in the day. So I think that would be a really nice way to recycle some of, not all of the pavers, but some of the pavers, so we can keep them around.
Yep. I like what I'm hearing about donation. Let's keep this up. Yeah, I think I have no problem with either one, and I like the fact that Railroad Square, if you look at the history of Keene, it's historic. I mean, Keene started basically, in our early years on Railroad Square when the trains started coming through. So I really appreciate the fact that we're bringing back Railroad Square. I realize this will cost a couple dollars, and I might normally say no to, but I think it's important to preserve our history.
I like the single post, and I think as I asked you about snowplows running into bricks, granite holds up a little better. I should not be concerned.
I can definitely guarantee that we will never hit one of those posts.
That was recorded, yeah.
Your light's on.
Damn it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the comment was just made about, and I also like the single post. I don't see the need for it to be up as high as the Keene State College one or the Ashway lot with the granite is, right? I think it's a way to maintain the aesthetic throughout the city, but recognize that this is also a different area. I want to agree with Councilor Filio that as I said around the actual train tracks before, I got a different answer than I was expecting. This is an area that I'm okay investing in this project because of its historic nature, because it's something distinctive for us. So I like option one here, like the historical tie. The Gilbo Ave conversation about that arch, that feels like a nice to have down the road that I don't think has to be included here. So I appreciate the focus just on this one.
So you like option one?
Yes.
And
I like option one as pictured with the banner and the cutout letters and everything, just the way it is.
Randy?
Yeah, I'm good.
Laura?
I'd be okay with that.
Good. Done. Oh, but wait a minute.
So I recall the Centryway at Keene State, and then it was modeled at Ashwillet Park. It's very important to have the solid letters for photography. It will not show up with perforated letters. So that I find some design that's going to emphasize the lettering as opposed to the banner.
Done. Yep. It's fine. Got it. Yes.
Would you be opposed to the Gilbo Ave arch as a bid alternate, so that at least we would have the numbers if it was in fact added later?
Very good. I'm not opposed to having it, so. But that should be some easy math. What's next?
Okay, great, thank you. The shade structure, go ahead, Bob.
So in Railroad Square, we are proposing a shade structure. And there are three, and this came up during our discussions with the Heritage Commission. Spent some different discussions about, what is contained under the structure. Is it bike racks? Is it benches? Is it both? But for the structure itself, option one is a trellis structure. These are all, I should say, off the shelf, if you will. They're all pre-manufactured products. The first one is just a trellis structure, so it gives dimpled shade. The second option is actually similar to a trellis structure, but the roof is louvered, so it actually is potentially mechanical, so you could actually close or open. And then the third option is just a solid roof structure. And there are some variations within the different options. We can look at different colors, but generally in terms of the style and mostly the roof structure, whether it's open or closed or something in between.
What is the function?
The function was added really based on public comment about having shade opportunities in the park and a bit of covering for either seating, benching, or bike racks. So that option 3 is showing the covered pavilion that has bike racks in there. So there could be a combination thereof. I think we're showing a combination right now of a couple of bike positions in that area, as well as some sort of seating block.
It's not a performance center.
No, it wouldn't be it's not.
There's no tables.
That's right.
I'm having a hard time wanting it. Yeah.
This section, I do recall some conversations around constituent desire for shaded resting spot, which is why I'm confused to see kind of the first one to me looks more decorative than anything and doesn't look like it really meets that purpose. I'm not opposed to having this in, but I would be opposed to the first if the purpose is shade. I don't know that the dimpled shade makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Okay.
If I remember correctly of where we were hoping to have these placed, I'd go with option 3.
Yeah, I'll go back up.
Yeah, I honestly don't see a need for any of these. I think they're decorative. I just don't see they're being efficient. And I think when you talk about shaded area in Railroad Square, I think you'll see down the road, and I know there's a couple other businesses that are going to be moving in there shortly. I mean, I could see in conjunction with the businesses there and the city coordinating together, you put tables with the big umbrellas out there. If you go to Burlington and other cities, you'll see that the community and the businesses get together, and in the middle of the day, out come the tables, out come the big sun umbrellas, and it creates, I think, it creates a mood, and it also creates shade, and it doesn't cost. Like I said, I just don't see it. I think it's it's some artwork, but I just don't see it efficient, and I don't see it cost efficient. So I don't see any need for any of the options there. I think work with the community.
Chuck first, and then you, sir.
Chuck Redfern, 9 Colby Street, also a member of the Keene Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And I'm asking Councilor Haas to help me out if I misspeak on the representation that the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee had regarding this and why they did. I think they were, and correct me Ed again, I think they're going for option 3 because it did provide some coverage of the bikes that are getting increasingly more expensive and require some degree of shelter, seats, the other thing is the heat, the snow. People bike. I'm amazed to see it, but we have a lot of bicyclists in the winter. So it doesn't have to be a big, overcapacity thing, but just something for, I don't know. Ed, did you want to say anything else?
Ed Haas, Mr. Redfern said it accurately. The idea was to provide some weather cover for bikes in all sorts of weather, rain, shine, snow, sleet, hail. So that was the idea of the cover. Thank you.
Okay.
I know there's a member of the public wanting to speak to this as well. I
Oh,
saw
I'm
him.
sorry, yeah.
Well, just real quickly, want to say that now maybe I'm not understand. Maybe I was confused about what the intent of this was, because if it is just the cover for bicycles, then I'm going to need some more time to think about if we should be including
Yes,
this.
sir. I'm sorry. Lost you.
I think option 3 should be really considered. 1 and 2 are more aesthetically pleasing, like something I might put in my backyard and string some lights off of it in Christmas time. Option 3 is really practical for the everyday use. I know me personally, if I was going to go sit underneath one of those, I would choose option 3 because it provides the most shade, especially if I'm there working on a laptop or something like that, or reading a book. I think option 3 should really be considered and not just outright dismissed.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
And I certainly object to if there was a particular group that wanted this badly, that I've donated the money for it. I certainly don't think MSFI would object to it. So if a particular group would like something like that added, I think there may be a little bit of fundraising should be taking place.
Yep. Manager.
I will just add that we have had to change to more of the option 1, option 2 structure in other locations in the city because of people who may camp there.
Yep. Yep.
Personally, I don't think that's a valid reason to. Ian Matheson, 11 Court Street. Personally, I don't think that's a valid reason to just outright dismiss something. Just because one group is doing something and you're having problems doesn't mean that you need to say, well, unfortunately, we're not going to have this. I really think option 3 is valuable to the city, and it provides a unique experience to someone who's coming and potentially moving into the city and go, wow, downtown is really beautiful. I work remotely. I can go downtown in the summertime, sit under the shade. It'll be very aesthetically pleasing to folks wanting to come into downtown.
Okay. Well, part of what I'm a bit confused with, the way option 3 is being shown, it's a solid roof over a bike rack. So you don't have people sitting there. The bike rack could be removed, and then it could just be a roof for people that want to be there for a real long time. Option 1 and 2 are aesthetic, and I guess I'm viewing it that if there's a great desire after the project's built, this could be easily added. So I'm out. I'm option 4, none of the above. Yes, Laura?
Was there a discussion about having one in Railroad Square and then Gilbo? And I thought we had had the conversation that one was a priority and maybe not having them in both places?
There was talk of the big covered food truck thing. Yeah.
So the Gilbo Ave one is a solar structure. So that's the structure that's providing all of the power that will power the downtown. And it's actually over parking. So it's a structure over parking.
I mean, it's much larger.
And it's, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And just to point out something, as we're going through this, we're making choices right now. Once it comes to council for a vote, you can amend the committee decision to make it whatever you want it to be, or not.
Yep.
So it's not a final, so even though you're not getting your way on a bunch of things that you believe in. No, and I didn't mean it quite like that, but you know, that you're being, not getting what you want, so you can always bring it up and sell it to 8 counselors and you got it.
No.
Yes?
I think it might be important too, if you can, Ed, can you go back to the overall design of the site plan? Yep, and so, just, can you point out where the shade structure would be? Because I think the photos kind of maybe misled the fact that they may have been further up into Railroad Square. This is going to be placed in the back area by the bike racks.
Yeah, that's correct. This is kind of where the Cheshire Rail Trail kind of enters into Railroad Square. Part of that issue now is
we thought we needed to move it as far north as possible to separate kind of the bike path, which is shown here. But really at this location, this could be a refuge for bikes, could be some benches in here. The question about covered, just a covered spot became important toward the back. The value of Railroad Square is all of this open space that was really important, and that allows you to be as flexible as possible. But yeah, the shade structure is located toward the back right here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm still sticking with option 3, that we need this there. And the city manager brought up a good point. We accommodated covered parking for vehicles, and if I'm not mistaken, this was a compromise to also be fair to the cyclist as well, to offer some covering and protection. And I also want to just highlight that it's not just for cyclists' refuge. If you're walking down the bike path and it begins to pour rain, you can pop in there and seek shelter, or, wanting to just make a quick phone call and not be in the way or not be in the rain or the snow. So I look at it as almost like a quick pit stop of sorts for folks coming and going as well.
Okay, well, I guess we have to make some decision here. So, Jacob, what do you say?
I'm gonna go with option 3, contingent on it being some kind of mixed use that I didn't see in that photo, so.
Mixed what?
Well, not just it sounds to me like the community interest is in that as a general shade spot, not necessarily to stick a bike rack under it and build something over that. And I'm not saying that's not a potential use of it, but I don't know that just having that. So option 3, I think we need a shaded structure, but not just for a bike rack.
Do you want 3? I don't want it. You might as well just say camping downtown, because that's what it will be. Yep.
No, none of the above.
Yep.
I'll go 3.
Looks like it's 3, but
Okay, thank you.
as I said before, there will be amendments, so.
You've done a great job so far, and we're almost done. We're at Central Square, and there's only really a very narrow item here. So this is just again, the features of what we've talked about before and the options that came out of the preliminary design. So I'll hand it to Bob, and he can talk through these last 2 items, almost last 2 items.
So in terms of the paving materials in Central Square, what we're currently proposing is that the primary walkways, kind of the similar desire lines that are out there today would be concrete, standard concrete. But then if you remember that perimeter path particularly that we added when the green got expanded, we're suggesting that be stone dust. It's a little bit softer material. It won't be as heavily used. It's a little bit more kind of garden-like. We think it'd be a really nice character for kind of the secondary paths. And then in the center area where the fountain was and it's going to be replaced, we would suggest unit paving as kind of an accent area to highlight that as a prominent area in the green in Central Square.
And I'm just going to go back to the plan because I think this is helpful. The gray or the beigeish color here would be the unit pavers. That would be in the central gathering area where the water feature is located. And the main, as Bob said, the main pathways that kind of get you in and out of the center of the square is concrete, and then the option would be these perimeter paths to be something more like a stone dust. So that just gives you perspective in terms of what those two items are. So we'll start with the surface treatments right here. And there's, Public Works weighed in, they agree with standard concrete for the surface materials and unit pavers for the center of the square that we just talked about.
Yep, I'll go with Public Works on this one. The stone dust sounds nice, but once again, if you have people in wheelchairs or,
have trouble moving around, they should have equal access to the common as the rest of us. So stone dust looks nice, but I don't think it'd be efficient for anybody in a wheelchair or a motorized wheelchair. So I'll go with Public Works and their decision on this one.
Kat?
Yeah, I'm okay with the recommendations.
Jacob?
I've noted repeatedly tonight my objection to the unit pavers, but I will go with the Public Works recommendation here.
And Laura?
Sounds good to me.
Done, unanimous.
Okay, well, then really the last furnishing item is bench seating that occurs in Central Square.
So we have some various options here. Option one would be a metal bench. The idea would, there would be, all of these options for benches would have interim arms to reduce the opportunity for people to sleep potentially. And so option one would be a metal bench. Option two is similar to what's out there today. It'd be a metal frame with wood slats. Option three would be the same but backless. And then option four, there's a couple of ideas. One is we're incorporating some boulder seating in other parts of the project, as well as kind of the granite slab seating. So those are the options there. We only have a few of them. I don't know if you can go back to the
Yeah, I was
plan.
going to go back to the plan right here. So as you can see, this is a location where there's a bench here now, and then the other bench is in this area right in here. Some of that seating would be around the water feature and along the perimeter of that central island area. The backless, staff had made a good note on the bench seat that's backless, or even the stone block, allows you to be sitting facing the walkway, but also if there's an event or music being played at the gazebo, you have the option to turn yourself around and use it on both sides. So there's a benefit feature to either something like this that would be backless, or certainly the stones that would be backless too. So we're looking at options here, which is a metal bench, a wooden slat bench, which is similar to what is there today, something that would be backless, and again, these would have the midpoint rails to discourage laying on them, or stone blocks that would be similar to other locations in the downtown.
Yeah, and the stone blocks are it's really 4A and 4B. We have the natural stones versus the granite slabs.
That's true.
I would assume also the backless could be metal,
Backless?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
just to be more durable.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll go with that.
Okay. Kat?
Yeah, I like option three with the wood slat for, if we're talking specifically for Central Square. I think
Right.
that would just
Yeah.
look nicer.
Wood or metal? Do you care?
Wood.
Okay, Jake?
I actually like option two. I feels most like a bench to me. I'm not on the backless bench train. If it's going to be a backless bench, which I do appreciate the possibility of getting use of both sides of it, especially if there's something going on in Central Square. If it's going to be option three, then wood. But my first vote is option two.
I like option three. I think in Central Square, those will work fine. When I was speaking against the concrete one, those, as the mayor spoke earlier, those will be skateboard ridden. And so I don't think we should be using the concrete. Looks good, won't work. So I think the backless works the best.
Laura?
I personally like option 4A, but I could go with either option. I guess if not option 4A, I would go option 2.
Jay?
Okay.
Yeah, if you go option three, again, I'm worried about skateboards on a flat surface, so just whatever you can do to, and I thought that the metal idea with slats might.
But there are interim arms.
Not on number three.
On
Well, I
three.
think if we were going to go with option three, I think it would be similar to the bottom photo on option two, where you'd have the interim arm.
Yeah, those kinds of things that make it impossible, yeah. Handrails.
Okay, just to recap again,
3.
I'm a 3. 3, and you are?
I can get on board with 3.
You got it.
Great.
And whether it's wood or metal? You a wood?
Wood.
I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
Next.
As long as the wood's durable.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Dave's been sitting here for a while, and we're going to shift it to Dave to talk briefly.
Oh.
Very briefly, Dave.
Okay, before we get into that, Central Square has a fountain.
Yes.
Can you?
I also have a quick question about the design.
Yeah.
You go back to the design.
Yeah.
So Central Square has the fountain, and one of the things that came out in the preliminary design was an alternative that would, instead of having it centered, is to relocate it to an edge for several reasons. One would be to maximize the ability to use the center spot for whatever. This is showing the water feature on one end and reservation of space for the peace pole that could stand alone, or whatever else might come along. So now you have interest in 3 legs of what's happening at the gazebo, what can be happening at the water feature. That's not, and I think something like relocation or replacement of the water feature is probably a longer design consideration with the community. I mean, you're gonna wanna, we know that a lot of those parts and pieces there, particularly the granite slabs, were a product of a donation to another from another community. So I think that's still really up in the air. We know what the dimension of that center circle will be, and that's fine. Whether this project moves along with no change to the water feature, we'll make sure that any electricity and any water and sanitary sewer connection is made and updated. But we could also locate that at the new. So I'm saying a lot of words right now without really saying anything, because it's part of what I think would be a further design consideration from the community, maybe even outside of this project.
I'm glad I asked the question, because I didn't expect that answer. I did not know that the fountain was being considered to be moved, and I got a real problem with that.
Yep.
I thought I was just asking about the fountain itself, and I agree that that's a whole design that I'm not aesthetically skilled enough to make. Yes?
Thank you. I echo those reservations about not centering in Central Square the central feature of Central Square, which is the fountain. I have a question for the city manager, and I don't want to get too far down this road, but I just I saw the reference, I heard the reference to the peace pole, talking about the fountain. I recall being here a few months ago, voting on a very specific motion to direct the city manager to work with the petitioners to incorporate and a proposed peace pole into a new fountain design at some point in the future. I see it as standalone on there. I think we all received a number of communications on this committee from folks on both sides of the peace pole issue at the beginning. And when these slides go out and get posted and people are poring over them, I expect this will be another area. So do we have an update on?
Yeah. So I think this plan, you're right, that will create a question. They're reserving the space because it is an unknown at this time. Andy Bohannon has been working with the group that came forward for the peace pole, and they've been working on integrating elements into the fountain instead of creating a separate peace pole. They then went out to bid for a project. And then, once that came back, they have now changed their mind that they are interested in a separate peace pole. So that is the latest, and Andy, I don't know if you can add more to it.
That's correct, and I advised them to come back to the committee related to that option of just a peace pole. There was some thought of possibly repurposing the granite that's in the fountain today with some peace wording and that sort of thing, but really, it's back in their court to come before you related to the obelisk and the peace pole.
Okay, and just the follow-up, I would be mindful about the way that this is presented, because if I thought it, other people will think it.
Kat? Yes.
Thank you. I just want to circle back because I didn't really hear my original question answered when we talked about benches. I asked specifically on Gilboa Ave, if we don't do the lean rails, if the benches there that are currently there will still stay in place.
You mean Gilboa or Railroad?
Gilboa.
So the benches that are in Gilboa, are you talking about the ones that Public Works built?
Yeah, on the rail trail.
The
like-
granite benches?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can you turn on your microphone, please?
Thank you, Asa. So the benches that are there today were built by Public Works. We haven't asked the same questions over and over again, but the idea would be that the styles that you expressed your preference for would be used throughout. So there are some benches on Gilboa Ave that would be replaced with what you're showing a preference for.
All right, thank you.
Randy?
As far as the fountain goes, Councilor Greenwald had brought up in the past, there was several MSFI meetings that this would be something that we could really get the community involved in. And, I still think we could put it out there. You look at how the community got involved with the wall dogs, the murals. They picked them out. It was a long process, and they took pride in that. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of these things that we should have people, we got plenty of time, relatively speaking, to submit some designs, submit some basic thoughts of what they want, or, narrow it down to 5, let the community get involved in it. I mean, it's going to have to be cost efficient, all of that. It's going to have to work. But I think the community would like that, to at least have something in this multi-million-dollar project that they can say, they had their fingerprint on. So, I mean, we'd have to kind of start expediting that to get some type of a preliminary design. But I think, as Councilor Greenwald said in the past, let's get the community involved where we can get them involved on this.
Laura, did you have anything?
I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay. Don't move the fountain.
No, don't move it.
Well, just a quick question, and I am interested in hearing about the phasing and the mitigation plans and the ombudsman and all that, so I want to move along, but the way that I just heard the Public Works story, we're going to have the backless benches throughout the downtown, because I'm not sure that was the intent of the...
Yeah, that was the intent of the question. No. Okay.
Yes, City Manager.
Would you allow us some flexibility to use different styles of benches in different areas? Because I agree, the backless benches make sense in the common, because you might want to look at a different direction,
Right.
but they may not make sense in other areas. And so we can carry the same theme with the wood and the middle frame, but just have some opportunity to mix it up a little, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Done. Good. Everyone happy?
Yep. Kumbaya.
Moving on.
Okay, thank you.
And again, if anyone else wants to stand up for a minute, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Oh. All right. Back to work.
Right to call a 5-minute recess.
Oh, that's
We're
right.
over more than 2 hours.
You weren't around when I chaired finance. I'll be right back. Yeah. As long as we keep 3 seated, we're still alive. Yes, please, go
All
ahead.
right, thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so I'll try to keep this brief, and I'm sure we'll be talking again about some of the phasing and construction staging type work. So just want to go over kind of at a high level some of the mitigation strategies and the overall phasing. So what you're seeing here is the planned phases. I think we've shown this before. It's changed a little bit as the utilities have kind of been refined, but in general, the plan is to start at the north end, start at the Central Square area, and work our way south. So what you see in red would be phase 1, would be the first season of construction. The second season is the blue area, which extends a little bit off the screen, going up Gilboa and down Railroad a little bit. And then the third season would be the southern end of the Main Street, basically the green area here. The 2 different shades in there, so the kind of the solid light color in the background, that's just showing really the overall area of work, the overall impact, the surface treatments, the sidewalks, the roadways, everything that's going to be impacted. more of the hatched areas is really the utility work. So that's where the underground work is going to be, the ditches, the trenches, and what's really going to kind of drive the overall size of the project. You know, so as work goes through here, a key point, I guess, is, you know, the contractor wouldn't be working in the whole area at once. So there'd be restrictions on the contractor to say, you know, if he's working on the Court Street side of Central Square, say, the top of the square, the Washington Street side, and then coming across on the bottom and kind of the northern end of Main Street would be left alone. And then as that work progresses kind of around the square, you know, the work where the work had happened will get opened up and it'll move along to the next area. So just to go through a few of the different elements, you know, parking, there will be signage. The contractor will be directed at signage to direct people to alternative locations, to show people where parking is on Gilboa and kind of perimeter parking. There'll be a limitation on how many parking spaces can be taken during any single stage of construction. We're thinking that's 25 because that gets kind of the biggest individual block of parking spaces as we go through either the square or up and down Main Street. Sidewalks, it'll be staged. You know, it'll have to be built in sections so that we can maintain accessibility, maintain foot traffic, maintain access to the buildings as work goes along. Some of that will be accomplished with temporary ramps and kind of bridges to extend from a finished concrete to another finished concrete and over an area that may be being prepped. There is access requirements for ADA accessibility, for access to buildings. And then it'll be important, and there'll be a lot of signage during construction. So the contractors will have to give kind of detour signage for pedestrians and keep people going around, let people know that businesses are open, you know, how to get into certain businesses and get through the project area. Building access will be a contractor requirement. You know, we're not going to be able to cut off access to buildings, obviously. We'll work individually with buildings to give everyone advance notice when we're going to be working in front of their buildings, whether that's the sidewalk work, the utility connection work, as we're coming up and tying utilities in the front area of buildings, and maintain that ADA accessibility through the project area. Noise, dust, vibrations, always a challenge on any project, any transportation project. We're going to be digging, there's going to be exposed dirt. You know, so it'll be monitored during construction. The thought would be, you know, in some cases, a lot of those items are on the contractor as kind of part of their mobilization cost. You know, we can control that better if we put in some bid items and have an item for dust control and vibration monitoring and some of that built into the contract. So we can control it a little bit and better incentivize the contractor to keep up with it. And then the construction contract in general, you know, kind of to that point as well, you know, it's just clear and enforceable guidelines and directions as to what he has to maintain, how he needs to maintain it, the parameters around how he's going to maintain it. The contractor's going to come and he's going to have to present a schedule, a work plan, a traffic management plan. All of that stuff's going to be reviewed by the city, by the engineer, and have to be approved before they start construction. So within those construction guidelines and the construction contract, you know, we'll be laying out clear guidance as to how many lanes of traffic he can take, the parking spaces I mentioned, you know, what needs to be restored outside of work hours, what can be done during work hours with police and flaggers and kind of temporary traffic control. And then just seasonally, you know, the intent would be April to early December is kind of the typical season. Outside of that window, you know, things get a little tough with weather and pavement restrictions and temperature restrictions. So the intent would be to in there if it's late spring and early spring, you know, maybe that varies a little bit, but you know, that's kind of the expectation. 7 to 5 Monday to Friday, Saturdays and overnights with permission only. During holidays, city activities, you know, we'd have to shut down noon the day prior to any of those activities. Adjustments to community events, I think Dawn's going to touch a little bit on that in the next slide, which I will give to him.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And blissfully quick. So my section here is going to talk about some of the things we're doing to try to support businesses during the project. You know, I've said it before, but I'll say it often. I wish that I could say that this was going to be easy and there would be no disruptions, but it's going to be a challenging project for everyone. And I, just as sure as I am that there's going to be challenges, I'm sure that we're going to get through it, right? We can do this. So we've been talking a lot about ways that we're going to be able to help businesses get through this and make sure that concerns are addressed and whatnot. Probably the best idea, the number one thing that we're going to be doing is this project ombudsman role. This is going to be a temporary contract employee for the city, but it's somebody outside of the sort of construction team. It's not somebody in the engineer's office. It's not somebody from Stantec. It's somebody who is sort of apart from the project and can be sort of an honest broker between the business community and the construction team. Their job isn't so much to solve the problems as it is to identify and make sure that they get responded to, right, and track them until that gets resolved. They'll be attending meetings with MSFI, project update meetings so they know what's going on, but they'll also be meeting with business owners every week. So, we're thinking that this is somebody who's going to visit business owners, talk to them, see what challenges they're having, and then come up with ways to make that better. And to that end, that job description's been written. We've got a couple of business owners that have graciously volunteered some time to help us hire somebody. But once that gets advertised here in the next few weeks, if anybody knows some candidates, please make sure that they're aware of that role. Because it's not everybody that's going to be the right fit for it, so we got to find the right fit. Other ways that we're going to help the community. I expect we're going to be back here in front of this committee every month talking about the project and giving you all an update. That would be probably myself or the city engineer along with that project ombudsman. But alternating with those monthly meetings, we're going to be hosting what we've called the coffee and hard hats meetings. This is more of an informal get-together. Probably during the workday, probably either on Central Square, somewhere on the job site, or in City Hall if the weather's crummy. But the idea is just to give folks an informal venue where they can talk to the contractor, find out what's going on in the next few weeks, get an update, and then voice any concerns they might have. The last thing I'll talk about here, so I actually was invited by the staff at Hannah Grimes to visit with them. A couple weeks ago, they hosted a meeting for all of the community event planners. Basically, I guess this is like an annual event that they hold in an effort to get everybody together and coordinate schedules, make sure that people know, when events are planned and whatnot. So they asked me to come in and talk about how this project would affect their plans. We actually shared with them a draft alternative layout plan, if you will. Basically, my staff worked with the police department to come up with an alternative that when Central Square and that northern leg of Main Street is under construction during the first season, obviously we're not going to be able to hold, the food festival in Central Square when that's happening. The alternative, and I think you might have it as the next slide, Ed? Yep. Yeah. So this alternative is really showing what we think is the maximum area that we could support as an event footprint next year. Not all community events need this much space, so each event will have to kind of tailor it, as they do now. They come in, they meet with our staff, and they figure out what they need. But with the inclusion of the Gilboa East and Commercial Street parking lots in a cordoned off footprint, we can actually provide more area than any event that's currently happening in Central Square and on Main Street. So, the food festival, the pumpkin fest, those bigger events would still be able to occur. They're obviously going to be in a different location. That said, obviously that would take a significant portion of our event parking out of service. So I think there's going to need to be some communication and coordination with property owners like NGM Grand, Main Street America, about using their parking lot during events, that sort of thing. possibly using further out parking lots with a shuttle service for those events, to help those things. And like I said, not every event is going to need all of that area. We'll have to figure out, well, they might need Commercial Street, but not Gilboa East, and that would still be in service. So, but the point of this is just that we can support and continue any event that's currently happening in the downtown during construction. That's the bottom line. And then next. So this slide is really just talking about the different ways that we communicate for the project. The sort of in order of most to least formal, starting with the formal notifications. So, letters to property owners we've done in the past, like for example, when Stantec earlier in the preliminary design phase needed to get into every single building downtown. We reached out to the property owners, we sent them formal letters, and we asked them to respond and schedule a meeting. We'll be doing that again as, other details need to be communicated. Those don't always get to the tenants, right? So that is a way of communicating for certain purposes, but the direct notifications for things like if there's going to be a planned utility outage, all of our contracts, this is very typical if we have to replace a water main or a valve, and we've got to take a neighborhood off of water for a day, our contractors are required to hang notices on every door and that's affected 3 days in advance. Same sort of thing will be done here. That also allows us to reach those tenants, not just the property owners. Of course, social media, broadcast media, we do our weekly Public Works interview with Danny Mitchell in the morning on Monday mornings. I can't take any credit for this, but our staff does a great job with social media, not myself, but other folks. And those are used more for like, advertising that there's going to be changes to traffic patterns or more urgent announcements. If there's an unexpected event that happens and we need to get something out more quickly, we can use those tools. I do have a sort of a personal goal of trying to send out like a weekly email update. We have a update or an email list already going for this project. When people sign up for that, they can opt in to either email, text messages, or both. So my goal is to try to send out, just a quick, brief update each week to let people know what's happening and what to expect in the coming week. VMBs are used a lot. Those are the variable message boards. They're used throughout the downtown to advertise upcoming events. Again, we'd be using those for planned changes in traffic patterns, major events, that sort of thing that we want people to know about well in advance. The project webpage, of course, we've been using right along. We update it periodically with presentations like tonight, and that's going to be an ongoing thing. And then the last one is, I put tender there. We are right now working with the New Hampshire Department of Safety to get access to their emergency push notification system. We haven't gone through the training yet, so I don't know what the rules are around emergency versus non-emergency traffic and what we're allowed to use it for and what we're not. But the hope is that some of these announcements can be used through that. The advantage of that is that we can make those very targeted. We can target just the people who have cell phones or landlines within the project area, for example. But that's still kind of up in the air. And I think that's it.
You got to the end. Thank you.
Chuck, you had a question?
I've been sitting there trying to figure out how to make this a question, but I sat through the very first meeting that Stantec did to this is your last public presentation, or are there more to come?
Oh, there'll be so much more.
So much more. The outreach for this project has been incredible. The avenues that have been taken, the effort on staff, Stantec itself. I mean, we were talking about the color of trash cans and types and all this stuff. And I just want to say, please don't put a future council through this. You guys have done this. You've done the heavy lifting now, practically. Let's move this to next year and let's get it done. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you very much. That's why I was here for 3.5 hours.
Oh, good. Well, we're almost done. We're not done. Counselor.
Thank you, and thanks to Stantec for the overall presentation tonight, and thanks to the Public Works Director for not only can't believe it was earlier tonight, what feels like much longer ago, but earlier tonight and for this. I guess a question that I have, because this all sounds great from a logistics standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from the actual kind of mechanics of going through the construction and notifying the businesses, and I really like the idea of the ombudsman as kind of a neutral mediator for any conflicts or even any questions that come up, right? I don't know whose responsibility this would be or where exactly this would fall, but one thing that strikes me as something that's potentially really useful for businesses is if we could put together as a city some kind of easily accessible directory or group of external resources that may be really helpful. So one that comes to mind is, the Small Business Development Corporation, SBA, SBDC, right? I'll just run out of the UNH office. And so all these things that can help with financial planning, because I know that I've heard that as a concern. As well as, connecting with maybe some more local resources. And I don't know what that looks like exactly, but I think that we have the actual logistics piece down really well. I just wonder if we could better connect or better make businesses aware of some of the resources that are right here in the state.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may address that, one of those external resources is actually coming up next month. The Hannah Grimes Center has teamed with Radically Rural to put on a presentation. They'll be hosting that next month, and it's all about surviving projects like this for your downtown. I know staff is going to be interested in that. We've also talked about trying to get together with that group and having more of a one-on-one discussion with them.
Councilor Haas, you had something?
Thank you, Chair. Ed Haas. I had 2 or 3 questions. The first slide that you showed that had the cross-hatching on it, that showed the phases of the project. Can we go back to that? Okay, so all of the areas that are cross-hatched will be opened up. Will the areas that are not cross-hatched not be opened?
So the crosshatch is where the utilities are, really the underground work is. So the areas that are outside of the crosshatched, that's pavement, that's sidewalk, that's still going to be rebuilt. So the sidewalk, we're not going to leave little patches of pavement in between.
No, of course, yeah, you'll do a surface cover, but will there be holes there? Will that be excavations?
Most of that area it'll be a shallower cut just to dig down and put a solid base underneath the pavement or a solid base under the sidewalks, just so that everything is clean and you've got a matching base under all
right, so
the pavement.
the deep cuts are where the crosshatching is?
The deeper cuts are where the crosshatching are.
All right, and second, during the construction phase, you mentioned that you would only be doing one side of the project area at a time. So it'll be the west side of Central Square into Central Square and then come from the other side. So both sides would not be shut down at the same time.
Correct.
Even though traffic may not be permitted through or construction reasons, but one side at a time is
Right.
what I'm hearing. Okay,
Yeah.
and that continues all
That
the
would
way
be
down
Main
through the
Street, yeah.
project. That's super. Third question was 3-day notice for utility shut-off. If there's any way that could be longer, have faster notice, earlier notice than just 3 days before it's going to occur. It's kind of tough.
So the 3-day notice has sort of developed over time as sort of the compromise between, what we would probably prefer to provide a week's notice, and what we find is that contractors just aren't able to stick to that. Unfortunately, things happen in construction, plans change, weather changes. So I would like to suggest 3 days being a good middle ground.
Fair enough for the contract purposes, but during the project, let's press to get as early projections
Now,
as we can.
now
which I
to
think
that
we have
end,
in
we
mind.
can certainly let people know that stuff is coming. We know that we're going to be working in your neighborhood in the next 2 weeks, but we're not going to be able to say specifically, this is the day at 8 a.m. that we're going to be shutting off your water until we get a little bit
Until
closer.
3 days out.
Yeah.
Okay. I know there'll be 3 working days, not.
Correct.
You're not coming on Friday and telling me Monday.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
He caught my loophole.
Laura? Yeah.
Thank you. Couple quick things just about first of all, the communication piece. I think that in terms of what we're talking about, sort of there's the urgent day-to-day communication, but establishing the expectation of communicating even starting now, as much as we can, to be saying, by this date, or this month, whatever, we'll have sort of a rough timeline, and by this date, we'll know. So sort of just establishing expectations, because without doing that, people sort of just keep wondering and they ask questions, and it's a source of anxiety. I think it would be great if we could make sure that we communicate with the farmers market and any other groups that are downtown but don't actually have like a physical location where they are 7 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever. And then in terms of the construction phasing, I know that some plans have an invasive species management part in there, and I would love to see that incorporated in there as well. Just making sure that how any species found, how they're disposed of and not transferred.
Yep.
Anything else? Silence, good. Crickets. Okay, before I thank everyone, I just want to urge any members of the public that are still awake and listening to us, or at least the media might carry this, any resident or business owner or what have you that has an idea or a suggestion, there are 5 MSFI members, city manager, public works director, even the city attorney. Bring in the suggestions. We are open for ideas. I've heard some really creative stuff, and just tell us, and we'll carry it forward. It is a partnership between the consultant, the contractors, the public works, the city manager. Tell us, give us the creative ideas, because ultimately we all want to see the merchants come out of this successful on the other side. I have no doubt that the project's going to be great, but I would really like to see all the same businesses and restaurants that we have now be there when this project is complete, whenever that happens. So bring on the good news. So with all that, thank you all. I thank you, committee. Oh, yeah, we do, and also there's something else. So the appropriate motion that should be going on now, you have, Council Filio?
Sure. Move to recommend the City Council approve the final design for the downtown infrastructure project. The city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to implement the project with the street furnishing, materials, design preferences discussed tonight.
Second.
We have a motion that's been made and seconded. Anything? Yes.
I just have a quick question so that I know exactly what I'm voting on. How is this going to be presented to the council in terms of a report? And I only ask because there's already been some suggestion that there are potential amendments coming forward, and so we went through a whole list. Is the list going to be kind of presented? Okay.
I would imagine I'm going to stand up and I'm going to run down the list of our choices that were made. I'm not going to run down the list of all the alternates. I'm sure that anyone that has been with us through this whole presentation knows the alternates or can find out. And then if there's something that is disturbing to you or any other member of the council, you will move an amendment to the motion, and you get 8 people to vote with you, and it happens. Right?
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favor? We are unanimous. And as I'm being reminded, Council Workman.
I just want to take this time to remind folks that there's a parking ban effective at 1 a.m. I found it when I was popping on the city website looking at our plans for this project. So it was nice and highlighted in red right on the homepage of our website.
And it's fortunate that this meeting did not run till 1 a.m. And with that, I thank you all for coming, and we are adjourned.